Welcome. Tonight is a special meeting of the City Council of Louisville, Colorado. Can we get a roll call?
Mayor Lay,
Yes. Here.
Councilmember Kurt. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton. Here. Councilmember Hefner.
Yes, here.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Here.
Councilmember Fahey. Here. Councilmember Dickinson.
Here. Right. Can we stand as able and say the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Tonight is a meeting with the Revitalization Commission. I want to thank all of you for being here. And I think we've got the entire commission here, right? Except for Corey, the chair. Am I missing anybody else? Are we missing anybody else? I tried to reach out to her and she is otherwise occupied. So at any rate, we are in well, we're not quite in a circle, but hopefully we can do a good job tonight and have a good conversation about the sort of three issues that I think we have broadly described in the agenda. So I think our new city manager is going to take the lead in opening this up. And why don't, before we go start, if everybody around the table can introduce themselves, that would be good, just in case we have folks who don't know. Chris Lay, Mayor.
Barbara Hamilton, Ward 3, Mayor Pro Tem.
Josh Cooperman, Ward 1. Dietrich Hefner, Ward 3. Good to see you all.
Rob Zucchero, Community Development Director.
Vanessa Sate, Economic Vitality Manager.
Hi, I'm Corey Hoffman, the attorney for the LRC.
Ryan Holohan, Economic Vitality Specialist.
Bob Tofty, LRC. Cliff Harold, LRC and Ward 2 resident.
Lexi Adler, LRC and Ward 1 resident.
Jeff Lipton, I'm LRC member and proud to be a Ward 2 resident.
Barbie Iglesias.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Jeff. Barbie Iglesias and Ward 2 resident. 3 resident.
Kurt Carr, Director of Public Works and Utilities.
Kathleen Kelly, City Attorney.
Diana Langley, City Manager.
Judy Kern, Ward 2 Rep.
Caleb Dickinson, Ward 1, and I also serve on the LRC.
Deb Fahey, Ward 2. City Council.
Great. City Manager, why don't you take oh, you got two others, sorry.
Emma Fox, Deputy City Manager.
Jenny Klein, City Clerk.
All right. And we have a bunch of visitors tonight and we need to be mindful of that as we move forward here. City Manager, would you like to take it away?
Sure, thank you. So first I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. I know how difficult it was to schedule this meeting and just appreciate the time and effort. There's three things that are on our agenda tonight. So the first is discussion direction related to the 4th amended and restated cooperation agreement. The second is discussion direction related to the front and center project 30% design. And the third is discussion direction on the new urban renewal area plans. And when we scheduled this meeting, we tried to commit to a 3-hour time frame. And so we want to try to honor that time frame. As it relates to the 4th amended and restated cooperation agreement, the proposed approach tonight is to review the comparison table and determine where agreement can be found for the amendment. And the goal is to receive direction on how to proceed with the 4th amended and restated cooperation agreement. Looking ahead to the discussion direction related to the front and center project, the proposed approach is to receive the presentation from Kurt and then some goals that we have. So in general, are we all on the same page regarding budget and schedule? For the city council, thoughts on contributing capital funds to the project budget? And for LRC, is there any additional information needed to provide a recommendation regarding elements to be included in the project? And then as we move to the final item on the new urban renewal area plans, the proposed approach is to discuss how new urban renewal areas could benefit economic vitality in Louisville, discuss what the requirements would be, and then the goal is to walk away knowing, is there a desire from City Council and the LRC to have staff analyze potential new urban renewal areas? So with that, I'd like to move into the discussion related to the Fourth Amended and Restated Cooperation Agreement. In front of each of you is the comparison table that compares the existing agreement to the agreement that was proposed by the LRC to City Council, and then the agreement that was proposed from Council to the LRC. And it highlights the current IGA language, what the proposed request was from LRC, what the counter proposal was from City Council, and then some notes. And with that, before we get into this discussion, any questions about the approach? Cliff, is there anything that you would like to say in terms of the vice chair of the LRC?
Not really at the moment, but I do think that the first and the third agenda items are pretty closely related. So we may be circling, kind of back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good. And to that point, if there's a desire to combine those two items or to change the schedule so that we address both of those first before we get into the front and center project, it might make sense to go ahead and do that.
I wasn't necessarily suggesting that because front and center is going to be time consuming. And honestly, I'd like to do as much as we can not to cut that short.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions before we get started?
I don't have any. Council members have any? The one thing I would say is this, particularly the first part, is a little bit of an oddity, perhaps, in the way that we may have to have part of this discussion simply because of history. I think council is going to need to have, some discussion and deliberation over our piece of this, and to the extent that LRC needs that, we invite that too. I think we recognize that there have been, discussion points that we've raised before, and we hope to just work through those tonight. And I think that's what City Manager Langley is suggesting. But to the extent that we're going to be discussing that, I think that's perfectly appropriate, and we'll get to those points in just a few minutes, I think.
Go ahead, Lexi.
Quick question. Can you explain the process of how the city council modifications were created, or what process you all went through to create these specific notes, or how they were agreed upon? Oh.
Council, would you like me to address that question? Okay.
Please.
So I know that there was a lot of confusion over this process in terms of LRC submitted an agreement to the city council for consideration. It went to city council. The city council approved it. After that meeting, there was question as to whether or not the agreement aligned with the recommendations that came out of the workshop that had occurred prior. That prompted additional discussions amongst council in terms of what they would like to see in the proposed amendment. And that's how the proposed terms came forward in that proposed amendment that came from city council to LRC. I know it went before the LRC, and LRC elected not to move forward with it. And so that's what's prompting this discussion of if there's a desire to do an amendment, then how can we find some common ground and be able to move forward with drafting the amendment? ahead.
I just wanted to add, since City Manager Langley wasn't here when the joint meeting was held last year, she listened to the recording of the meeting and took notes, and that's where some of these amendments came from, because there was a desire by a council member for some of these changes that didn't make it into the draft. And so hopefully that answers your question.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, if I could just, two things. First of all, to the extent the draft did not reflect the discussion, if that's true, I plead guilty because I was the drafter. And we can certainly go through the agreement kind of piece by piece, but I would suggest to you this really is about a policy question, an underlying policy question. And if we want to go through it point by point, we can, but I think the big picture policy question is a lot more important than going through this point by point, which is frankly, what does the city council want the LRC to be? And if you want me to kind of frame the policy question as I see it, I think it might help the discussion and make it perhaps more efficient.
That would be great.
So I think I met most of you previously when we had the previous study session. I represent urban renewal authorities and cities and towns across the state. I represent Aurora Urban Renewal, Arvada Urban Renewal, Wheat Ridge, and several others. An urban renewal authority is a statutory creature that is a separate body. The money that the LRC receives from TIF goes into a special fund of the authority. It is a fund that is not a fund of the city under state law. It is a fund of the Urban Renewal Authority. The oversight that is in this IGA that and was in the previous IGA is unusual. There is no other urban renewal authority I represent and no other urban renewal authority in the state I am aware of that, for example, gives the city council budgetary authority over the LRC's budget, because that special fund is a special fund of the authority. Having said that, if that is the relationship that that the city council big picture wants, okay, because the job of the LRC is to implement the plan of the city council. That is our job, is to implement your plan. But I think the reason that there is typically not the type of oversight that is set forth in this document is because once the plan is adopted, the job of the Urban Renewal Authority is to implement your plan and to do so in a nimble fashion. And right now, it takes 4 months to get anything through the LRC under this draft. And if that is, again, if that's the city council's desire, the LRC's job is to implement your plan. But it really does, from my perspective, as an urban renewal practitioner, have the LRC trying to do its work with one hand tied behind its back, because we can't be reactive to needs as they may come before us. And I'm happy to go into more detail, but it really depends what you want us to be. But whatever you want us to be, the job remains the same. Implement your plans as they exist from time to time. And skipping ahead to item number 3 at some level, because I think they are related. Urban renewal authorities are subject matter experts under the statute. And so to the extent you want to use the Urban Renewal Authority, not only to implement existing plans, but to recommend potential future plans, that's part of the scope if you desire to have it be that way. If not, this really isn't a discussion where we're sort of doing the lawyers dueling, because this isn't a lawyer issue. This is a policy issue, an underlying policy issue of what you want the LRC to be.
Do we want to start with that issue? Because I think that's certainly something we can address. Council members, why don't we hear from you, or if there's questions to be asked, please ask them of our council or members of the LRC or their council. Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
I do have a question. So, if what prompted this, desire to reevaluate the working relationship and this contract here? I think you mentioned one of them, which is time. But is there anything else that prompted you all to reevaluate what this relationship looks like today and moving forward?
I started this out with an apology since I was the one that drafted the agreement based on the discussion at the previous joint study session. I thought I captured that. So I was attempting to capture the discussion that I thought LRC and City Council had in updating the IGA. So there wasn't any sort of agenda, if you will, other than bringing it, I'd say, forward and current and consistent with what how urban renewal is practiced. And that was the discussion I thought at the joint meeting. And so my, I guess, ill-fated attempt was to capture that discussion.
Well, and I'll add, part of this came up from a practitioner standpoint of a project would come in asking for some level of assistance to come to fruition. Depending on urban renewal and city council agendas, sometimes it was 6 months before that applicant got a decision back on if there was going to be urban renewal assistance for that project to move forward.
Oh, thank you. So my takeaway from that joint meeting we had, and it was a really good meeting, we had a really good conversation, was that there was a joint desire to try to make our processes more efficient and streamlined and more responsive to the business community that might seek, financial support or grant of some kind. And I don't think we talked about the specifics of how to do that in that meeting, but that was the takeaway. That was the goal. And then we let things percolate through staff and the attorneys, and they came up with this draft. I think we looked at August, maybe September, but we hadn't heard anything. We just, we saw the changes. No, first we did see the draft that Corey drafted, and we said, sure, go ahead and present it to staff and council, and they did. And then we really hadn't heard anything back since then. So I guess we assumed we were going to have another meeting, try to hash out the differences, so on and so forth. I do want to point out historically, this goes back to the 2000s, when the city council desired to create an urban renewal authority in Louisville, and I don't believe there was one before this one was created. They faced alternatives. In fact, there was a referendum as to whether or not we should have a separate urban renewal authority, or does council want to act as the urban renewal authority, which often does happen. And there was a vote, and the referendum came through so that council would appoint a separate urban renewal authority, which was this. And with that, though, there was this agreement between the urban renewal authority and council that has changed slightly over the years. I think one of the takeaways we had from that last meeting was that it needed to be updated, just freshened outside the policy questions, because some of it was pretty misstated. And yeah, I have other things I can mention, but I just want to put that out there. We thought, the goal was to try to make things more efficient, streamlined, and we made a proposal, and I guess you rejected it. So here we are, hopefully with the same goal, but trying to find different means to accomplish that goal.
And what I would say, I would agree with that. I think over time, and I served on the LRC for a period of time as a council representative before council member Dickinson joined. I think there was a long-term frustration by everybody around, and especially LRC, around just the length of time it took, the clunkiness of all of this. And I don't think there was a person around the table the last time we met who didn't agree that trying to become more nimble was at least at a high level what we were trying to do. And there were misunderstandings or missteps. I don't know what you want to call them, but what I want to do really is to pull us to today, because I think whatever we've done in the past, I kind of want to try to move forward from that. And certainly one of the things that I will say, and if this may be the final word on it, is that my mistake, and I'll take it entirely upon myself to say it, is in not stating all of the agreements exactly as we had thought we'd reached. And so tonight, I think, is the opportunity, if you will, to have the redemption meeting to try to clarify that, so we don't leave with different ideas. I'm hoping that we can hammer through this, the changes, and I appreciate your Corey, your suggestion about what we want the LRC to be. I think, and again, subject to my colleagues and your colleagues' thought, I think the way we were going to do that was just through a couple of provisions that I think help to define that, and I think have been, if you will, the sticking points or the points of friction that we just need to get beyond. I certainly, one LRC member has said to me, just tell us what you want, we'll just do it. And in some respects, that's true. But I mean, we picked you all to be on this commission because we believe very strongly that you're a commission with a great deal of expertise, a great deal of smarts and collaboration, and that you're wanting to fulfill the duties that you have under the agreement. And I think that is really important. We want to make sure that you are empowered to do what it is that you are required and authorized to do. So with that in mind, if we get done, Corey, and we haven't answered your question, then I think we have failed. But I think if we can try to get through the few points of disagreement, or potential points of, I should say, points of friction, let me just say that, and we can probably zip to the end.
I think Cliff had some comments, and I also think Councilmember Hefner was going to speak.
Thank you, Diane. I would like to do a couple things. One, I'd like to double down on what Corey said about the nimbleness point. I call it agility. He calls it nimbleness. But I think this is something that is critically important, and it's important in two ways. The first is that our role in the 4.5 years I've been on the LRC has evolved in pretty significant ways, pretty material ways. When I first started, we were looking for something to do. We did not have a very clear idea about what could we do that was materially beneficial to the community. We weren't having a lot of developers coming forward and suggesting this, that, and the other thing. And we kind of sort of landed on, with quite a bit of conversation with staff and council members, on this front and center, what we'll be talking about later today, this front and center project. And for the past 2 years, that's been 90% of our focus. We do have some small programs that we work on at most of our meetings, but most of our attention has been focused on this front and center project. We're mostly done with that. We still have an obligation to council to make some recommendations about design elements, but a lot of the front end work is done as far as we're concerned. But what we're now starting to see, and there are a couple of examples of this, is what Corey has advised us is we're more likely to see going forward are specific development projects, not big urban renewal districts where we'll do $10 million worth of bonds to do big projects like front and center, but block or even smaller block area development projects that developers will bring forward. And this is a critical issue in the disagreement or friction that we see in these two plans. I think the budget thing is sort of pretty, basic, pretty simple, but the authority we have to enter into redevelopment agreements is considerably more complicated, but we think we're going to see more of that going forward. We're dealing with one right now. So that goes to this specific agreement. It also goes to this agility idea. If we're out there talking to developers, or Vanessa is talking to developers, and the best we can commit to is a 4 to 6 month turnaround, it's over. Discussion might as well be just killed right then. Which brings me to my second point. I spent 25 years in economic development in communities in Boulder County. And let me be crystal clear, if you're not already clear about this, I know you are, but I want to iterate it nonetheless. We are in a highly competitive environment here. And frankly, we're getting our lunch served or eaten by our competitors because we are seen as slow. And this practice reinforces that lack of nimbleness and agility. So if you're happy with restaurants going to Lafayette and Longmont, you're happy with new businesses going to Erie, you're happy with what Broomfield is doing, then this agreement is fine because we're not going to be able to be nimble enough or agile enough to be competitive. But if we don't like that behavior, we need more agility, we need more nimbleness. And that's what's changed from the agreement that was in place when I started and where it feels like we are today.
Thank you, Cliff. Councilmember Hefner.
I was just going to agree with the points about, trying to make LRC more agile. I think that's the right direction. I think that's what we're all steering toward. And it sounds like the mayor has a way he'd like to proceed, and that's fine with me to go item by item. But I know I was part of making the mess. I apologize for my contribution to the mess. And, I think there's going to be some amount of oversight that council wants to retain, but not at the expense of making everything take 4 months. I mean, that's certainly not anyone's goal.
Any others want to comment on what either Cliff or Dietrich has just provided? Yeah. Councilmember Fahey.
I would just like to agree with what's been said, that originally the LRC was pretty effective in what they were doing. They didn't take anything on immediately. It was gradual, but what you've done has been remarkable. And just coming up with the plan for the whole Front Street redo it's just something that's going to bring more business to downtown Louisville. It's going to support the businesses that are there. It's just going to make it much more vibrant. And I like the idea of you having more autonomy in what you do with your money. And if we have to finalize something, okay, we'll finalize it. But didn't hire you. We chose you to volunteer for this board because of your experience, because of your skills and your ability to make good decisions on what would help the downtown area. So I would like you to see as much autonomy as you need to feel like you're actually accomplishing something.
And I very much appreciate myself Commissioner Harold, the comments about competition in this area and the importance of what you're doing and how fast you're able to do it and to this process. So I think unless I hear differently on council, I think we can proceed with that assumption that that really is the basis for why we're here and what we need to keep in mind as we move forward. And if you want to.
So oh, go ahead, Councilmember Dickinson.
I was just gonna, from what I've heard so far, and maybe someone wants to say something different, from what I've heard so far, the agreement the LRC brought accomplishes everything I've heard so far. So I would partly like to understand why we are going to do something different than the agreement that accomplishes everything we just talked about.
Yes. Oop. Did you raise your hand? Councilmember Hector? Okay.
All right, so rather than go line by line through these items, I think I'm just going to ask some general questions for council. So number one, do you want, if they are administering existing programs, do you want approval of those agreements to have to come before council for approval?
Can you clarify what you mean by the existing program?
Existing programs at the LRC. Corey, do you want to?
Yeah, I guess I want to take a big step back. In an existing urban renewal plan area, TIF is generated by redevelopment activity that occurs in the area. Right now, that redevelopment activity is going to generate TIF that is pledged to bond, ultimately to Front Street or Front and Center. Okay. But what we're talking about in an existing urban renewal area is if a new redevelopment project comes in that would be, as a result of that, creating net new TIF revenue. So new redevelopment activity creating net new TIF revenue that's not currently contemplated. That is the type of new agreement that would not be contemplated in an existing budget because we wouldn't be contemplating the TIF revenue generated by the new redevelopment activity. But that's the core piece of being nimble. If the LRC looks at the plan and says this is consistent with council's plan, then under the urban renewal law, we would be authorized to say, okay, let's enter into the redevelopment agreement where we pledge that net new TIF as a reimbursement for improvements generated for the new development. That's the agreement, at least in my view, that right now takes the minimum 4 to 6 month process in the existing plan area. So that's the real world example of what we're talking about.
An example, just put some parameters to it, is you all received a copy of the third party TIF review for Delo Boom. If we wanted to move forward with a cost sharing agreement with that development, it currently needs a 3-step approval by both bodies.
And just last thing, remember that any new agreement, the city's not on the hook for anything. And in fact, the Urban Renewal Authority is not on the hook for anything because the way those agreements are generated, it is only if the redevelopment is successful and generates TIF that that money is reimbursed to the developer or pledged to the development. If they don't generate TIF, there's no dollars to be shared. And under no circumstances is the city a backstop to that.
If I'm hearing that correctly, what I think you're saying is that there's not reason for oversight in connection with those kinds of redevelopment. Or let me put it differently.
Law doesn't require it.
Right.
It is the policy decision for you whether you need it.
Yeah, I should have stated it a little bit more generically than I did, but you're right. And I guess maybe we can use that as the frame of for council is as to the redevelopment provision, do we have any need for oversight? Yes, first Councilmember Hefner, then Councilmember Cooperman.
I think no, and I don't know if maybe there's confusion. It's been a long time since I've seen the actual draft, but looking at the first row of the last page of what's in front of us, the city council version, I think, agrees. LRC shall have the authority without prior approval of city council to enter into redevelopment agreements. So I'm not sure we're at odds on this one.
If you look, I think the section that we had originally contemplated deleting was then kept on I'm looking at the fourth on my spreadsheet on page 1. The LRC shall provide to the city council for review and approval any redevelopment agreement or other contract contemplated to be carry out the purposes of the urban renewal plan.
I think that might just be it.
I recommended deleting that. The city council's requested modification was to keep it. That is the language I'm talking about.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it may be a drafting thing though, because if we're going to propose on the last page that you have the authority to enter into redevelopment agreements with no approval, I mean, that's just in conflict if both of those are in there. The first row of the last page.
Well, again, if you look at the city council modifications, subject to city council approval. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that a new redevelopment agreement would not be in the budget because those revenues wouldn't be contemplated because it's net new TIF. Yes.
Okay. So it would be both a new program and a new redevelopment agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to take, unless are there other questions from Councilmember Koopman? Are there going to be other questions? Okay, Councilmember Kern, go ahead.
Just to go back for a moment. So when you said that the LRC evaluates whether or not, say, a new development agreement, a redevelopment agreement is consistent with the council's plan, what is the plan you're looking at, or how do you go about making that decision?
Fantastic question. The urban renewal plan technically is the document that the LRC is charged with implementing. So that is the plan. And in this case, the Highway 42 plan. At the time the plan was adopted, there was a finding by the Louisville Planning Commission that it was consistent with the then comp plan. But practically speaking, part of the LRC's job is to assure through, and I think that's frankly Council Member Dickinson's role in many respects as the liaison. If council's vision has changed as it relates to how council would implement its existing plan, that's at least in my view, the purpose of the liaison. But ultimately, we need to know that it is still consistent. So the Dela Boom project, I think if you look at the urban renewal plan, it is one of the types of redevelopment activities that's contemplated. That's what we do. If city council's comp plan dramatically changes as it relates to, for example, the urban renewal plan area, that's one of the reasons you have to have this communication between council and LRC to make sure we are doing a good job of implementing your plan.
And I will say that's part of staff's role as well, that when applications come in, we are making sure they're aligned with all the adopted programs and policies before we bring them forward to LRC or council for approval. If staff were to say no to one and someone still really pushed it to come forward, we would bring that forward with a staff recommending denial because for whatever reason, we find that it does not align with the plan.
Good point.
Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. So, just to try to help me understand. So with something like Dela Boom, that actually came to the council, right? So you guys, we had talked about it. No? Just the concept?
The planning portion came to city council. What would come through LRC is a rebate of the incremental TIF generated. That has not been in front of city.
Right, but I'm saying the project had, right? Okay, so now you know where I'm
That's a
going.
fantastic point, because you're gonna have land use authority.
Mhm.
Really, the urban renewal authority is a financing mechanism to implement whatever the land use approvals are that you provide.
And I think so it goes one step beyond just a land use, as I think it's also what is going to be done on that land, right? Like what the exact development is. It could be something that that a proposal that comes through is not approved. Like that's why I think it needs to come through the council. So it would have to be a project that's been approved, but then they sit, like I know Rob always tells us, like just because we say yes to something, it doesn't mean that it gets done or it doesn't get just like a high number, like half of them don't ever follow through with development. Yours is, if it's already been approved by the council, you're helping them to get to the finish line. It's not that a project would come to you that has never been to the city council ever.
I would say we're part of the financing mechanism, because if it is in the plan area and if it is consistent with blight elimination, you've approved whatever the approval process is through the city council. Our role, if there is this discussion about but for urban renewal assistance, is this project able to move forward? That's the role, is filling that gap financially.
And I will say, just from a timing perspective, there's something to keep in mind. We've engaged and all these TIF reviews that we're talking about are done by a third party analysis human, who's paid for half by the LRC, half by the development. But it does go through a but-for analysis to prove that if not but for these rebated funds, the project could not come to fruition. But there could be a timing that they need these LRC funds to pull the trigger on the project, and when the site plan actually, or PUD actually gets approved at city council, and the funding at LRC could not always be in the same order.
So this is so the request that you're making, Corey, for these changes is just you want to make sure that the LRC, when a project comes forward, has nothing to do with the development itself or the land use. It's just this group, whatever the entity is, right, needs financial assistance. You guys have the ability to look at their application and quickly make a decision as to whether or not it's a viable opportunity for the LRC to engage and assist.
Yes.
But it's not the project, it's just the financial assistance with a project that would still have to go through the typical public process and come to council.
Yes, and there are sometimes projects that come to the Urban Renewal Authority before they've ever come to council. And I think part of that is, sometimes urban renewal authorities often assist in working through the city process and saying, yes, we think this is consistent with the plan. Here are the boxes you need to check. And if it's consistent with the city's urban renewal plan, consistent with the comp plan, it may be the developer comes in and says, how do we do this? And in many communities, the LRC, again, Vanessa wearing both hats, because also economic vitality, says, we can help you make sure that you do all the things the city council needs to do its side of the approval, and we're doing the financing piece.
Let me ask a clarifying question for Councilmember Curtin. What are you in particular concerned might not happen, wouldn't happen?
Public engagement.
Pardon me?
Public engagement.
Well, I mean.
So it's the financing piece that does not require that, I don't believe. That would fall under your authority and your purview. I think it's the project and approving a project to come forward that didn't go through the public process is my sticking point.
Never be approving a project. This urban renewal authority is not giving building permits or approving a site plan. That is not the jurisdiction of the urban renewal authority. The project would still have to go through all city systems to get approval and get permits issued, and has to get a CO and open and operate before the TIF funding would ever come into play.
But I want to clarify this very carefully, because they talked about, Corey explained the difference between the financing and the land use. Land use is governed by our land use code, and it involves whatever public process is involved. But we approve that, and within that, you have developers that come forward, and if, as you know, at least my understanding of land use is if they meet the criteria that they have for that particular project, it goes through, whether it's there, sometimes it comes to us through quasi judicial, sometimes it goes through administrative, but we are not going to decide a public process or know what exact, I mean, we never do this, exactly comes forward from a developer. I mean, they go through a process of, that's set forth after we've approved a PUD and so forth. So I just want to make sure that there's not any confusion. And obviously I can subject to correction by anybody. I just want to make it clear, we don't have that authority right now to be approving project by project the kind of use that's taking place. So I'm a little confused. I want to make sure that that's not the issue that you're driving at without, okay, that's not the issue. All right. Thank you. All right. John, go ahead.
There is a public process also. Right, there's a public process with the LRC, right? I mean, everything is done in open meeting, right? And their packets and so forth, so.
Yeah, but it's interesting you say that, because that's what I wanted to touch on. The only public hearing an urban renewal authority ever has is for the budget. It is not intended to be a quasi judicial or a legislative body. Its job is to administer the urban renewal plan that's been adopted by the city, to implement it. So yes, you are absolutely correct. Open meetings, it's on the agenda, there's public comment, but it is not intended to be a public engagement process. It is intended to be a financing mechanism ultimately for implementing the plan of the council and getting a project across the finish line financially.
Yeah, Councilmember Fahey.
So would it be accurate to say that what you would like is to have the authority to say, yes, if you want to build this and you get city council approval for the construction process, then we can give you this much money?
I think ultimately the answer is yes, but that money is typically done to offset things to eliminate blight. And
Right.
in many cases, that's actually public infrastructure. So many redevelopment agreements, the reimbursement is for things like roads, utilities. And I'm going to give a very minor example because in a different community, and Wheat Ridge had issues with urban renewal for many years. And so they paused it for a short period of time. The first new agreement they did was for Wheat Ridge Cyclery because they wanted to build back the trust in the community about what they were. And it was for a mural, it was for public infrastructure, but it was certainly blight elimination. And it was the type of thing that the development couldn't do on its own, but it created this benefit in the entire area.
In all of our urban renewal programming, everything is reimbursement based, and in any contract with LRC, it is required that they go through city processes, and staff verifies that they have done that correctly, and that on any improvements where they had to pull a permit or big permits, they got a CO and they got a certificate of completion. And we verify all of that they've gone through the right systems before we issue any reimbursement.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that you're not approving a project. We still approve the project. You just give the developer the incentive to do the project. Okay, thank you.
Let me make a suggestion just so we can move past this piece. My suggestion is on that fourth or third part of the first page, the suggestion by um, uh, on the LRC, by the LRC, the proposal was to delete that section 5D, or at least that language from 5D, correct?
Yes, and 5A.
And 5A.
Which are, I mean, a lot of these are related, and that's what makes this very difficult. Which is why I suggested the kind of the big picture. I guess I would suggest turning the tables. What type of oversight does the council want? Because then we can take this language and modify it that way as opposed to the other way.
I'm looking at this too much as a lawyer, clearly. I'm going to suggest to council, and I'd like to get kind of a straw poll on this, that we not keep any oversight over those redevelopment agreements and see, because what I'm hearing is that the rationale for our council oversight doesn't really exist. There really isn't a need for that. And I guess what I'd like to do is propose that and see if we have unanimous approval. If we don't, then we can talk further about it. Can you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Or a comment?
Just,
yeah.
So, I mean, it's tied to the budget question, right? I think what I'm hearing is that if we give up this, we have to necessarily give up budget approval also.
I would say probably at a minimum budget amendment approval. Again, the language I originally drafted on the budget had it submitted to you. And I think because I think the idea was to submit it so you know what we're doing. But LRC is subject to the local government budget law, just like the city is. Same process, exactly. And so because the dollars in the budget are from the special fund as opposed to the city fund, I would say submitting it to you and making sure that it is consistent with your plan and your vision before it's adopted on an annual basis. I think I had language to that effect in the original draft. It's just once it's approved, going back for all the amendments is what creates additional time. How do we, that's another 3 to 4 month process. And if it's net new TIF, that could kill the deal.
Do you have a sense, like what's the range of budget amendment we're talking about?
Delo Boom is probably a good example. I would think if that project goes forward, it is going to create net new revenue that's going to need a budget amendment during some year.
And I'll say in unrelated example, we had a facade improvement program ask come before urban renewal in December of this past year. What they were asking for, the total amount was not available within that line item budget. We had $300,000 we could have pulled from another program budget to help offset that cost. If we were to do that, it was LRC, you all approving the budget amendment back, and the total cost that would have been moved was about $5,000 out of 300,000.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get a sense of is like, what's the range of dollar amounts we're talking about in terms of budget amendments to do Delo Boom? Let's use Delo Boom as our example.
So Delo Boom's gap is about $2.5 million. It's somewhat of a bad example in that the net new TIF generation for that project, because of the time frame left on our urban renewal area, cannot fill the gap. But let's say the TIF did. It's a budget amendment to reallocate those new dollars, but it adds to the bottom line of our budget because those dollars were not accounted for in our projections ever. So like in theory, Delo Boom we're looking to fill a $2.5 million gap. Other ones that we have brought forward this year, have a mix of funding available to them.
So $2.5 million is the answer to the question.
It could be, I guess, but that's over that's over multiple years. I think that's why that's not the answer to the question, because the $2.5 million is generated over a series of years as increment is generated. And what is difficult about this discussion and the budget discussion is right now you have one active plan area. But if the city council on item number 3 were to approve additional plans, you could have multiple plan areas, a much larger budget, and a lot more budget amendments.
Yeah.
So that's why this is, with the current plan area, you've got an expiration date. And so it's a pretty confined discussion.
What I'm trying to get a sense of, and maybe this just is the wrong tool, and feel free to tell me that, is there a dollar amount for a budget amendment? Is it $500,000, $800,000, but below which we can say this is basically an ordinary course of business budget amendment, no approval, no nothing. But if, let's say in 1 year, it's a $5 million budget amendment, my view personally is that something we might want to take a look at if it's that big of a project. And is there a threshold that we can set? And feel free to tell me no if there's not.
In my time, the largest budget amendment we did was $600,000 because the timing of the project in which we were going to pay it switched years. But the funding was already allocated, but that was the largest budget amendment we've done since I've been here.
And it's difficult because, again, we have an existing plan that most of the dollars are spoken for.
Yeah.
So it's a really hard hypothetical. But you know, when you talk about urban renewal projects statewide, Union Station was an urban renewal project. The Belmar was an urban renewal project. So when you think of it in that size and scope, it's really hard to put a dollar amount on it. But in all of those plans, the city council approves the plan and says, go forth and deliver us the project. And so I guess to your underlying question, do I think you're asking the wrong question? Probably, because the city council approves the plan and that has the world in which we operate. And I think the urban renewal law structure contemplates that the budget is the dollars that are generated by redevelopment activity going into the special fund of the Urban Renewal Authority for the Urban Renewal Authority to deliver for the city council the project.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Dickinson.
It sounds like it might be a moot point, but I think the big thing for me is whether it's $5,000. I think you're trying to find a threshold of like, well, let's allow this amount, but whether it's $5,000, $100,000, $1 million, they're always partnered with $10,000 of income, $150,000 of income, 1 million of income. So it's always a net gain for the LRC. They're getting new money and then giving back a portion of it or all of it, but they're never going to spend their money. Like what if we say, hey, this is your budget for 2027, they're never going to spend more than that. They're only going to spend more if they get money from that exact project. So it could be a big project, but a big thing could come in and say, hey, we're going to generate $5 million of revenue. Can we have 4 million of it back? Well, the LRC will have $1 million more than it did before. And does council want them to have $1 million more or not? But like, oh no, well then the project doesn't happen and they get nothing, right? So like if we were to turn that one down because it's 4 million is too much, well then they don't get any money, right? So everything's a net gain for the LRC. So the budget amendments size for me is sort of like not really the point. The point is, are we ever going to tell the LRC what you're doing to create this new thing? Giving the rebate, which is what they're supposed to do, doesn't align with us. Like, when are we going to tell the LRC no to anything when it's always net new money and it's a net gain for the LRC? So I don't know if that helps at all, but it sounded like you'd already kind of gotten your answer.
Pardon me? Yes, we had two questions,
Okay.
Alexis, and
I
then
just want
Jeff.
to maybe clarify, maybe you all already understand this, but this is mostly, I would say, like staff led. Like the developer will come to Vanessa and her team. She prepares the proposal. She goes through and makes sure that it meets our, qualifications. So, we essentially we have oversight from staff. So we're not doing anything crazy. These are projects are all coming to us. And then we're evaluating them, but staff evaluates them first. So it goes through the whole city process. And I just wanted to make sure that we're not like going rogue, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, listening to this conversation and some of the issues, it's kind of where you stand as a function of where you sit. And I'm not going to argue against the LRC, but I can appreciate where you guys are sitting and some of the checks and balances that I think you all legitimately should have in some of this process. And, Corey, I don't want to nitpick, but you made a comment that if there's a project and council could turn down the project. But I'm not sure this is a legitimate way of turning down the project. So, I mean, technically, you're probably correct, or maybe technically you're not correct, but as a matter of course, for a land use kind of decision, I don't think having an approved TIF or not is really a criteria that council could use. Now, I'm just putting that out there and I'm speculating. The process has worked, and but I do have a couple of questions on some of the conversation on the financing. First, did we land anywhere on bonds? Is council going to still have to approve bond issues?
That's in my view, that doesn't concern me, frankly.
So council would approve bond
I
issues.
think the language that we suggested on the second piece of it, the original language was, yes, that such bonds shall be subject to prior review and approval by the city council.
Okay.
That was our recommendation, yes.
Yeah, if I was a council member, I would definitely want to have that.
Yeah, and that is different than a moral obligation pledge, just to be clear. There are maybe times where the city council, from its public finance attorneys, are asked to do a moral obligation pledge, which is a much more formal approval that you're putting the full faith and credit of the city behind those bonds. But this would be, because urban renewal authorities are not Tabor entities, this is the type of bond issue that does not go to the registered electors because it is secured by TIF, by the pledge of TIF only. So it is a different type of financing source. But, in large bond issues, oftentimes bonding companies and underwriters will want the full faith and credit of the city behind a bond issue. That is beyond what this current section provides.
Yeah. Then my last question, and again, it's a little technical on the issue of the budget. At some point, the LRC budget that does get rolled into the city budget. Isn't that correct? Totally separate, but
Under Colorado law, it is a separate entity for purposes of the local government budget law.
so is it so it's reported separately from the annual report that the city produces?
It is a separate budget,
Okay.
yes. Now, how the city, if the city, when it provides the budget, if it provides the budget of the city and the LRC together, that's fine. But the ultimate budgetary authority under the local government budget law for the Urban Renewal Authority sits with the Urban Renewal Authority.
So at the end of the year, when we get into this process of proposing a budget or approving a budget and council reviews it and has to, I mean, that would include the new TIF. If there were new TIF that was approved during that fiscal year, I would assume. So at that point, the council does in fact technically get involved with the budget.
The new TIF never hits the city general fund.
No, but the urban renewal, it's in the urban renewal budget and financials. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and you
at the end of the year, the council has to approve those.
And you
What-
see it in our budget now, in the urban renewal budget, that if we have approved TIF sharing agreements, they are line items within the urban renewal budget.
Yeah, but the city council doesn't have to approve it under Colorado law. I guess that's what I'm saying. This is a creature of Louisville to have city council approval of the LRC budget.
So that's what we have done traditionally. And the change is now not to do that?
The original suggested language was to provide the budget to the council for its comment, not for approval
Oh,
though.
just for comment?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Boy. I want to take just a step back because I realize that a lot of these issues are interrelated. I also realize that I want to get us out of here by 9 if we can. And I really don't want this agreement to be hanging out any longer than tonight. That's my own personal hope. We've got issues regarding the budget. We've got issues regarding redevelopment. We've got issues regarding the bond, and we've got issues regarding new plan areas. That's the way I see the very big picture. And maybe redevelopment, which is where I started asking the question of council, maybe that's the wrong area in. I mean, maybe or the wrong pathway in. Maybe if we started making decisions relating to the budget, we could start there. That will lead us to the other issues. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Hefner.
So look, this has been a helpful meeting so far to me. I know it's a little tedious going through the technical details. I would propose something which is council continues to review and approve the yearly budget, but we don't do any review or approval of budget amendments. I mean, that seems to me to be a compromise that probably enables a lot of the things that we're trying to do here while keeping some oversight.
I agree. That's my takeaway.
And you're, just to be clear, not putting a dollar limit.
No, it would be nice to get notice of budget amendments, but I'm no approval mechanism.
Well, we could certainly get that. I would assume we get notice of it. That's not terribly hard if people want that. That's a whole different story than approval. Councilmember Dickinson, I went past you before.
I don't remember that. Yeah, I mean, I think that what's contemplated in the original document is presenting it to council for comments every year anyway, and that isn't subject to a particular moment in which someone is being delayed for their particular project, right? That's like, hey, it's November, let's put our budget to council, and like, yeah, that looks great, and then like, great, and then we approve it, and we move on. But in June, when a project comes before us, we don't have to do the back and forth. So I think a planned back and forth at the end of every year to look at how the money was spent last year, or at the end of that year. What did you guys do last year? What do you plan on doing next year? Great. And then throughout the whole year, they're able to work with individual applicants nimbly, quickly. I think that solves the issue largely.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the language, and it is easy to reinsert the word approval because we had deleted review and approval. Reinsert approval. We'll just need to figure out, and I can certainly work with the city attorney on a timeline so that we get it back, because we have to approve it in the same manner you do in the same time frame each year by the end of the year under the local government budget law. But I am sure we can make that work.
But to be clear, it's not provide comments, it's approval that you're suggesting. Okay.
Reinserting the words and approval. And
I think if you want to set a, specific timeline for that, so that when to get it to us, we know the date certain by which we need to approve it, that would be enormously helpful. Council, where are you at? Is that what council member? I think what we've added to what Councilmember Hefner's point is maybe the timeline and what look back. Yeah. Go ahead.
So Mayor Lay, I thought there was language in here proposed by both parties with respect to budget amendments, but I'm not finding it at the moment. So I'm looking at Corey. But I mean, we obviously need to capture that as well.
I think what council is suggesting is the amendment process would just be the LRC with notice to the city council that it is happening, but not that it needs to be approved.
Okay, but
And we'll rework the document to make.
I thought it was in here, but I don't see any reference to amendments. Just skimming it real quickly. So I just want to make sure we capture that.
I just want to be with council, want to make very clear what we're doing. So we don't have any more confusion. This is what I didn't do the last meeting. So it's that we approve the budget of the LRC annually. And on a certain schedule, which they're going to work out between council, I gather. And we're going to have that timeline in the document, hopefully. And we're going to have what Councilmember Dickinson suggested was a look back at some point. That might be, is that what you were suggesting? I'm just trying to take it into account.
I'm suggesting that we move forward with the LRC's recommended agreement, adding an annual approval by council of the next year's budget. So that it did not have that, and then we are adding that.
Yep.
But otherwise, if you want to change language, you'd be changing the original one. And I haven't heard any need to change language from the original one. So that would be the next conversation. If there's something in the original agreement that was approved by LRC and council that needs to be changed other than the annual approval, that's what we need to talk about. But that's where we're sitting right now. It's just one word different.
I want to get council's imprimatur on that or not. Do we agree with that? Yeah, go ahead.
So I need it clearly stated exactly what we are agreeing on.
Well, since you want to start and state it because you started it.
Sure. And well, let me just say it and then I'll get a reaction. So on the topic of the budget, reinsert the language giving city council approval of annual budgets, take out anything that requires city council approval of budget amendments regardless of dollar amount, and let the attorneys work out the timing of the annual budget approval. I think those are the three legs of the stool.
With one caveat that we provide notice to the city council of the amendments.
Notice of the budget amendments. Thank you.
Okay.
4-leg stool.
Can we give a thumbs up about that? Are we comfortable with that? All right. Is that comfortable? Not that I distrust Corey and his fine representation, but are the commissioners comfortable with that?
I just want to ask the question, what's the goal of having that approval rate? What are you trying to accomplish by doing that? So if we wanted to say add something to one of our programs, delete something something that's, normal in the course of business, do you really want to have to approve those on an annual basis, setting up the budget for the subsequent fiscal year?
I think that's a question we haven't quite dealt with. That's sort of a question about the programs, which I left out of my list because that is one of the it's an open question. I myself really don't want to approve programmatic changes any more than I want to oversight over the budget during the year.
Well, setting aside the programs, if we're still focused on the TIF, if we've already done the TIF and you want to review it for the subsequent year as part of your approval process of the budget. What are you really trying to accomplish? We're kind of already committed to it.
I think that's, Councilmember Dickinson mentioned it initially. I think it's just simply, it's information. Do we need it?
So, let me just try. I mean, this is changing things dramatically that Louisville has done historically. And so I would suggest I can even articulate that it's a way for council to confirm that the plan is being implemented consistent with its direction. So, I mean, I think, is it contemplated by the urban renewal law? No, it's not, but it is a great way for council to at least confirm on an annual basis that we are doing their work correctly.
Yeah, it's what we would call an arms control, I suppose, a confidence building measure, right? And an accountability mechanism. Go ahead.
I would also just add, it's a great program. In the absence of the urban renewal program, the tax increment part of it would flow to the city, right? In some ways, it's public money that's being diverted. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from taxes that would, I mean, the but-for thing is what it is, and I understand that analysis, but it comes from money that might otherwise exist and get paid in taxes to the city. And so I think to me, it's reasonable to at least have a look. I can't, since I've been on council, think of a time we've heavily scrutinized, really taken a very hard look at anything in the LRC budget, and I would fully expect that practice to continue, and unless you want to spend it all on lobster tail and crab legs, in which case let's talk.
Leave out the lobster tail and crab legs exception to this. I think we have an agreement on a rather important measure. So we're on a roll. Why don't we tackle, if you will, the redevelopment question, which is related, I think, but I want to, and maybe it's the redevelopment and the program piece of it. I think it's really redevelopment that we were focused on. And what parts of the agreement? Just a moment. Probably Corey may be able to point us to those. I think the first line of the last page is where that language comes up.
It is 5A, it is 5D. And again, I would say that from what I have heard, and I hope I'm not overstating this, I thought there was sort of alignment that this idea of being nimble, if you have the budgetary oversight, you see what we are doing. The question is, do you still want approval of new redevelopment agreements or not? I think it's really that simple, and then Kathleen and I can figure it out from there.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Maybe we would take a quick vote, but I don't think we want to approve redevelopment agreements. I'd like to talk about programs. Should we?
The suggestion is no approval from council of redevelopment agreements. Is that what we're talking about? Right? Okay? Thumbs up on that? All right. Seems like that one is resolved too.
And then this is, I think, related to the programs question that 5A says, any proposed expenditure by the LRC which has not been previously approved as part of the LRC budget shall be subject to prior review and approval of the city council. We had recommended deleting that. And I think, frankly, that is related to the budget issue, if you've already looked at the budget.
So I'm good on 5A. It's 5E that I'm curious about, whether should new programs that have been developed by LRC, and I'm really asking, should those be subject to approval or should they not?
Who are you asking the question of?
Anyone with an opinion. It seems to me that a new program, like it listed an example, is the facade improvement program. If we were going to come up with a new program similar to the facade improvement program, I would think that's something council is interested in looking at, but I could certainly be persuaded that we don't need to.
Others on council comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I reflect back on the COVID times. I really feel like the LRC has had control over its own, but I think of like in that COVID moment, if the LRC says, hey, we want to use some of our money to help downtown, urban renewal authority area businesses during COVID. Again, I find that odd to be like, well, let's see what council, like, because it's the LRC's fund, right? And it's being used within the LRC so again, if that moment is like, well, hold on, we'll have to go to council and come back. Now it's a 3-month delay during the crisis. Like, what do we, in that example, and I'm not saying it'll be a crisis next time, but again, if they contemplate something that fits the program, why would we want a 3-month delay on that? And there might be an answer to why we'd want a 3-month delay, but I would again, I think we can make up any sort of stories you want, but by the end of the year, you'd be able to look back and say, what did you do? Right. And these are all appointed members of a committee. And so I just think the chances that something crazy happens and our LRC creates a program that the council is entirely against is very, 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 very slim. And I know it's not the point of these kind of agreements, but we're talking about a commission with very little money right now that's not already committed. So there's not, what program are they going to come up with to spend their no money on, right? And so I think if they said, this facade improvement program isn't really important this year, can we pivot that to a slightly different thing? Like, well, we'll have to go back to count.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I know you're not being aggressive about it anyway. I don't see the risk, and I don't see the risk for council or the benefit for council for weighing in on that moment. But maybe there's an example I'm not thinking of.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Councilmember Hefner, is part of the concern that, we all have an invested interest in that area of the city, and is part of the concern that maybe instead of complementary programs, we could have redundant programs, or the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing?
Yes.
Okay, is that something where maybe staff could be a really good point person to make sure that doesn't happen? And if they do have concerns of potential redundancy or whatnot, they could then bring it to us?
Yeah, something like that would be fine. I'm not married to this other than I do think there's and I think this is sort of what you're saying. Among the general public, there is not a big distinction between the city of Louisville acting through city council, the city of Louisville acting through the urban renewal authority. And if there's some program, it will be reported in the paper as the city of Louisville has created a program to offer rebates for X, Y, and Z. And I think all the points Councilmember Dickinson made are good ones that were unlikely. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to come up with a bad program. But at the same time, it will be often perceived as a program of the city.
So I think for me, I'm personally comfortable then with that being your primary concern, with staff and the city manager and attorney being responsible for bringing things to us when there's concerns of redundancy or non-complementary programs.
Well, and the other piece of that is that for those programs to even be proposed, the LRC is going to have to satisfy itself that they work to eliminate blight. And that's the main piece. I think that worst case scenario, if there was some program that, where that didn't happen, then that, I suppose, might create some challenges. But I just don't, I'm not worried about it either. So I think I'm comfortable with it. I guess the question is, are you comfortable with it? And does anybody else have comment on that? Yes. Yeah.
As economic development and urban renewal staff. And so whether it's at LRC or EBC or elsewhere, we talk quite a bit about how programs are complementary. And if an incentive program doesn't live with me, like at HBC, we have close coordination between staff internally to make sure that programs aren't paying for the same project dollar, right? Or there's not overlap on that side. We also do a yearly report out on economic development activities. Happy to do a year report out on urban renewal activities as well. But staff works to make sure that the programs offer a variety of assistance to projects, and that whether it's urban renewal or a city program, we're not overlapping dollars to get that project over the finish line.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Kern, and then Commissioner Adler.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Lexi and then I'll make my comment.
Yeah, I think I was just going to reiterate, we have the staff guidance, and then also we'll always have a council member that serves as a voting member too. And I want to make sure nobody forgets that. We'll always have, Councilmember Dickinson or someone else there, and can help facilitate that. And I think also most importantly, the guidance from staff too. Again, they're mostly bringing everything to us and bringing ideas to us, and then we present feedback. So I think those two elements also provide a good check on us.
So just to be clear on that, I'm looking at the
Judy.
last.
You got to come back to Judy.
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead. I missed.
No, I wanted Lex to speak first. I was interested, and I thought we all should be interested in what she had to say. So my proposal is actually that it comes to us once a year with the budget, just so we can see what the programs are, what they have recommended, what staff has taken them. It should not be throughout the year, just like the budget. That way we all know what's in the plan. It's kind of like understanding any of the other programs. We like to know what they are. It's that piece of uniqueness of Louisville that the council has just that final look and say. I agree with Councilmember Hefner. Probably it will always be agreed upon because you will make excellent decisions and choices in the best interest of the area. But I think to have that final say with the council, because all the people in this room will not be here in 10 years, right? So I think we had to think beyond ourselves and say it's just part of Louisville process. So I think having those plans come to us with the budget might be the best way for us to just see what they are and say, thank you. Yes.
Can I just
Yes.
ask a follow-up?
City Attorney.
So I believe that Vanessa said that these programs are line items in the annual budget. And so would that satisfy you?
Yeah.
Receiving the budget with the line items?
Yep. And that way
Okay.
it's part of our approval. It's not just the budget, but it's the plans.
Great, thanks.
I think one clarification. One part of the proposed change is that we wouldn't be approving programs throughout the year. We would approve. Are you comfortable with a change in a program not coming to council? Okay, good.
So we don't have a pre-approval requirement. Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like that one is resolved too in terms of programmatic changes, unless we've got other comments. Those are going to be for LRC, with the exception that they'll be included in the budget that we approve for the coming year. All right. The bond piece was another.
I think we can work that language out, frankly, between the city attorney and I. For example, an urban renewal authority cannot issue general obligation bonds. They are only bonds that are secured by TIF. So we can, I think, refine that language. I think both entities want council to approve the issuing of bonds by the Urban Renewal Authority. I'm confident we can accomplish that.
Do you have any? Okay. All right. So we got that. So we're left with approval of new or potential new areas of urban renewal, right?
And I can probably, I mean, this is probably number 3 in total, and that is only the city council has approval under Colorado law to approve urban renewal plans and to approve condition surveys. The way the process works under Colorado law post January 1st, 2016 is either the city council can initiate urban renewal plans. It can also ask the Urban Renewal Authority to study and initiate urban renewal plans. Once either one of those mechanisms are used, if council says, we want to do a plan in this area, before that plan can come to council, the Urban Renewal Authority has to enter into agreements with all the taxing entities, including the city, county, school district. So there is built-in collaboration. And so really, I think the question, and I would say there's 3 types of plans. There is a broad plan like your current plan. There is a more targeted, yet city or urban renewal authority initiated plan. And then the third is a developer initiated plan where the developer comes in and says, I have a gap, I'd like to use the urban renewal tool. The process is the same in the sense that it is council that approves the plan, council approves the condition survey or the blight study, and the Urban Renewal Authority enters into the agreements before the plan can ever get to the city council. So I think the overarching question is, does city council want the Urban Renewal Authority to study whether or not there are new plans that might be appropriate for the city or not?
I'm going to ask whether council does support that. I certainly do, but I want to just do a quick poll. Yeah, go ahead. Maybe not.
No, I mean, like, it seems obvious to me. Why would someone say no? That I like, what am I missing?
Urban renewal is a controversial tool. And we're in Boulder County. Boulder County is not a huge fan of urban renewal. The county commissioners, the county itself,
Because of the tax component? Got it.
and there's a lot of policy components as to why other taxing entities, and I think Councilmember Hefner kind of this idea that you're diverting.
Yeah.
And it's really about whether or not the but-for analysis is really there. So it is a controversial tool. There's legislation this session that is seeking to limit urban renewal. So I think that's why it is not. As a practitioner, I agree with you. I think it's an incredible tool.
But it's not something we do unilaterally. We have to negotiate.
Okay, so then,
it's not
Mr.
like-
Mayor, your question is, are we interested in investigating other options for urban renewal? Okay.
We always stage that power question.
But it's not just new projects and areas. It is also new forms of redevelopment programming, like downtown development authorities, like Lafayette just did. I mean, they went from a URA to a DDA. And so somewhere that conversation needs to be had as well. And I see that as part of this third item, but
No,
we're talking.
Renewal authorities are not authorized.
I know, but from a city point of view, and we do have some expertise in how these tools work, I think that's something that needs to be part of the consideration looking ahead, especially when our plan expires. Then what are we going to do?
Councilmember Hefner.
Just to the original question, I think the answer is clearly yes. And I actually think we're not far apart on the language here in the table. I think it's pretty darn similar.
All right.
Mayor, can I ask a very targeted, specific Louisville question? Because I
Of
think it will
course.
come up. So if a developer comes to the city and says, I have a project and I need urban renewal assistance, who's the gatekeeper? Because, and I had this very specific conversation in a different community in a venue exactly like this. And that community said, we want the city manager to be the gatekeeper, because the city manager is going to be the one that knows, yes, you should go talk to the urban renewal authority, or no, let me go back to my council and see if this is the type of plan. But that gatekeeper function, because we, the city will get developers that say, we want to do urban renewal. And I would suggest the city council needs to identify kind of a gatekeeper for when that happens.
Okay, first, are people comfortable with the providing or asking the LRC to investigate and study and do what Cliff said, which I didn't entirely follow, but permit the LRC to review as well. Are we all comfortable with that?
Because Vanessa still, I mean, as the staff liaison, she's a part of all of these conversations. And in fact, she might be the one bringing the recommendations to the LRC. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. So the second question, if we all thumbs up on that. All right. So the second question is the gatekeeper. Who would we like to make the gatekeeper there? I think that's a good suggestion. Yes, Councilmember Hamilton, and then Councilmember Dickinson.
I mean, I may not understand the full process, but is it naive or is it necessary to identify the gatekeeper right now if we don't know if it's going to be an area or a developer comes and asks, like, is it premature to do that?
This is really for the developer driven. So a developer comes to the city and says, I want to do urban renewal. And that is becoming more common. It is a very targeted type of urban renewal, and it's a heavy lift because even if it is a targeted urban renewal project, let's say it's a single vacant lot that has some great idea. For the city to start that process involves negotiating with all the taxing entities. So it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So if you're looking at that sort of developer initiated project, it's a heavy lift. And so the question is, who is that gatekeeper to say, yes, this is a heavy lift that's worth it to the city council, and therefore, yes, go talk to urban renewal about a potential plan.
A tangible option that's in front of us is Delo Boom. With the lifespan of our current urban renewal area, we cannot fill the gap that they need to overcome that but-for analysis. An option could be taking them out of our existing urban renewal area and putting them in their own new area where they would have the full 25-year runway of that TIF capture that could close the gap.
Okay.
And so what Corey's saying is Deal Boom decides they want to move forward with a new plan area. Before we go down that full process, who's giving a general thumbs up that this is a project that could be supported?
So I'll just say, like, that feels like an important decision. And if we put it on a single person's shoulders to have to do that, I would need more information and discussion about what exactly that means. I'm not prepared to make a decision on that tonight.
Well, and I think that's why I'm suggesting the city manager, because if the city manager is the one to probably suggest, I need to go talk to my council.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the direction to know.
And I think even that, I'm not prepared to make that decision tonight. I need more information on it.
Go ahead.
Well, I think I might be reacting to the word gatekeeper versus like first point of contact. Like, hey, I'm coming to the city. What does that mean? Like knocking on the front door, like who do I approach? And that person doesn't have no one has universal decision-making power, right? So city manager or even Vanessa or the LRC or council, no one is going to do it on their own, but who should they talk to is all, I think, like, who should they talk to? Who's the person's door they should be knocking on to start the process? And I think any answer is fine. I think the city manager is sort of a generic, not gatekeeper, but first point of contact to, yeah, you should go to the LRC. You should go to council. You should go away. Depending on like what she knows. And I think usually she'd probably point it to one of the two bodies. Maybe you can speak, Anna, to how you feel.
I think in practice, they would reach out to Vanessa first. And then what happens is Vanessa then talks to Rob, talks to me. We would then talk to all of you to see where you sit on that potential development. It's not that different than what we're doing right now. And so I don't see it as a big stretch in terms of just saying, okay, yes, the city manager's ultimately the one that's going to talk to council and say, yes, this is a good investment or this is not a good recommendation to move forward. So I would say this process happens now. We just haven't formalized it to say, this is what we're doing.
And let me give a quick example because it might put a little meat on the bones. And that is some communities, the Urban Renewal Authority literally has separate offices, is separately constituted, and is still doing the same function, but acts much more independently, very unlike the LRC. But this idea of a first point of contact or a gatekeeper is to make sure the LRC doesn't get ahead of its skis and ahead of you and is still understanding that it is doing the job you direct it to do. And so having someone from the city manager, Rob, Vanessa, as opposed to coming straight to the Urban Renewal Authority, showing up on a Wednesday morning and saying, here's what we want to do. And us saying, great. And then you saying, that's a terrible idea. That's what we want to avoid.
Okay.
Can
I just completely misinterpreted what you had said. So in the interest of time, I'll just say if staff is comfortable with what we're doing right now, I'm comfortable with that.
Can I just add that really the best practice in other communities that I've seen is it's not about who, it's about how, because, most of these deals are not going to come. They don't even know there is a URA. They're not going to come to it. They're going to come through all sorts of different channels. And so the real challenge and opportunity for every community is how do we make sure that the organization is nimble enough, agile enough, well enough organized that it gets to the right person, whoever that is. I mean, it isn't necessarily the who, it's how do we get him to Vanessa or how do we get him to Rob? That's the key. And if that isn't crystal clear within the organization, among the staff, then that's the opportunity for improvement and greater agility.
And I will say, I do believe we do that pretty well already. A lot of these projects will either come through the community development director's office for the planning hat, or they'll come to me with my economic development hat. And then we work through, can you do it? Is it what's happening, but for who else needs to get involved? So that process happens pretty seamlessly now anyway.
So maybe this is a question for the lawyers. Do you think that it's necessary to include that language in? I'm fine either way. I'm just looking for closure.
No, I think this was more to make sure that the LRC, again, is doing work on behalf of the city council and not getting ahead of city council. That's really what this is about. But no, it's not an agreement piece. It's really about how you do new urban renewal plans.
All right. All right. So I don't think we need a straw vote on that one. I want to take public comment on what we've talked about because I think we're gonna need a motion at the very end from council, but if there's any public comment, now it's the time. No public comment. Okay, anybody? Okay, the public has left the building. Yes, Councilmember.
May I suggest, rather than a motion or a formal vote, if we ask staff if they have the direction that they need or if they need anything more from us. I'm not sure if there's anything else they need.
I think in the end, we are gonna just need an agreement, no?
It's a discussion direction item
No.
on the agenda tonight.
Right, what I meant was, well, the way it will come back to us will be an agreement for us
Yes.
to approve, right?
And I think what we'll do this time, Corey and I will work on the agreement again. And, you know, I want to throw in my mea culpa here too, because he and I worked together on that original draft that came to council. So to the extent it didn't reflect the discussion, I had a part in that too. We will distribute drafts before it gets scheduled on a council agenda, so you can give feedback and let us know if we've misunderstood anything. I think the only thing that I'm not totally clear on is, and let me just confirm, redevelopment agreements are not coming to council for approval, right? Thank you.
I think that's a good suggestion. And as soon, you know, sort of with all deliberate speed, we can get that, that would be great. I think you've got a good process, and I think we have actually resolved, I hope, a big set of issues, and we can move on. And now we come back to the question that you asked at the beginning, which is sort of as a policy matter, have we described in so many words what our view of the LRC ought to look like? Okay. All right. I hesitate to ask for any last comments, so I won't. I think we have. Yeah. Now, I think we've got both item 1 and 3 resolved now, so we can go to front and center. Let me ask since usually council takes a break around 8, just use the restroom and whatnot, and sometimes to say, gee, do we have the stomach for addressing any further issues here? I'm not even going to ask about stomaching further issues, but I am going to ask if there is any desire to take a break for 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, let's do that. If we can meet back here at 7:54, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Time to come back, everybody. Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
What did 50 Cent do?
What?
What did 50 Cent do when he got hungry?
One, it was brought to my attention that maybe the last item actually hasn't quite been resolved, that there may be at least some limited discussion about.
I withdraw that. I talked to
Okay.
Director Zucchero.
I just wanted to, I mean, if we want to strike while the iron is hot, if there's some suggestions, but we can address that and shut it down as we like. All right. So the next item is discussion and direction on front and center project. And I want to say at the outset that we deeply appreciate all the work that has gone on this project by the commission. And I'm myself delighted with the progress, want to make sure we give you what you need to try to bring it over the line. But let's go ahead. Who's going to present on this? Is it going to be Director Core? All right. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, LRC. Just want to echo the thank yous to the LRC for all the effort they put in. Also the focus group, just double down on all the thank yous. Let's just start with the baseline. We've been working on this for 2 years, front and center, 2 years. Did about a year of visioning and then probably like 6 months of talking about how much it's going to cost and how we're going to pay for it and how much money to borrow. We've been involved in about 6 months, 6 to 9 months of design. I would say we were all walking and then we were jogging and then we were just recently walking again. We're still walking, but we're about to sprint. Okay. And I think tonight is a really awesome opportunity for you all to come together and give us clear direction on how to manage that sprint moving forward, what's important to you. Just a reminder of kind of the pecking order we've all agreed on is council approves the ultimate budget, but they have delegated the project management to the LRC. The LRC delegated some of the input to the focus group for a period of time, but that period of time has closed. And now the LRC is kind of our body of decision making as we refine the project. And so your guidance tonight to the LRC will be key in that refinement. And then we're just trying to balance all the minds and ideas and things in the room. I will tell you, we've heard a lot from a lot of people over a long period of time. All the people, all the outreach, farmers market, street fair, residents, businesses. Vanessa, who am I missing?
Businesses, chambers, patrons, LRC, DBA.
Yay.
Businesses, library, visitors.
Yeah, internal staff. Lots of, and you all are available. So if someone over 2 years felt like they didn't know this was going on or no one checked in with them, gosh, I feel like they've had a lot of opportunity to say something. So we're kind of closing out sharing and listening, and we're starting to refine tonight. Okay. So let's all be on board with that. We don't want to reopen a bunch of doors because we're going to lock up and won't build anything. So that's our baseline. The presentation you have in your packet is old. We've already iterated through the week to like new numbers and some new concepts. So I'm going to show you a fresher presentation and I'm going to condense a lot. So those are your rules of engagement. I'm going to run through slides. We're not going to take a side quest until I'm done. Then I'll come back to the beginning and then we can start to answer your questions. That's our efficient way because y'all are good fixers and idea people, but yet we'll sidetrack like crazy on this. So I'm going to keep you organized.
Kurt, before you get started,
Oh.
just to remind,
There we go.
the goal at the end of this is that we're all on the same page regarding budget and schedule. For city council, is council willing to contribute city capital funds towards the project? And then for LRC, Is there additional information that you need to be able to make a recommendation so that we can know what elements we're incorporating into the project, so that we can move forward with the next phase of design? So thank you.
The other thing I forgot to mention is baseline. Somebody's going to be unhappy with our decisions we made. Someone's going to feel like they gave us an idea and we didn't listen. Like, I will guarantee that. So if you want to bet against that, I'll take your money, but I'll tell you what's going to happen after this. So here we go with programming, then current version of improvements, then the budget, then the schedule, wrap back. So 2 years ago, we started with a vision. We came up with a big picture vision. That big picture's on the screen. As we started to design and determine how much money we were working with, that vision constrained to the red squares that are on the screen. The red squares represented Steinbach Pavilion area, the Front Street area, like zero curbless street. Got refined to just intersections on Main Street. In those intersections areas, there was considered of overhead lighting, and then like what we would call curb treatments that put in fancy pavers, maybe extended bump outs. So there was more like seating areas. And then we like have tested like kind of where that got us, and that all got us to a 30% design. Okay. And that design kind of came together November, December. Since then, we've met with LRC and gone through the 30% design. The city council has had internal staff updates on that, but no, like, this is a council presentation to make council decisions. So this is a first public moment for the council to be like, oh, wow, this is cool. And then since then, we've also taken feedback and iterated through all this. So like everyone is kind of on the same page, but this is the first time you're all going to hear the same thing in the same room and have the same conversation. So we've already iterated, and we felt like Steinbach was around $6 million. Main Street was around $3 million. People weren't enamored with Main Street. So then we pivoted just after even the last 2 weeks to focus on just lighting on Main Street and heavy planting of the materials versus a lot of money put in the hardscape. So now we've gone from the Steinbach red square that's kind of holding standard, and we're value engineering within that, to, and then on Main Street, we've gone from the little red squares to now a bigger blue square. So that's where we're at. That's where we're pivoting to. Programming wise, one of the biggest things for this, other than to kind of like revitalize the area, is to also consider how you're activating downtown on a daily basis, not just Friday night, not just Saturday morning, not just other things. So daily programming, the thought that came to the 30% design is you'll have a splash pad, which is designed off of all the input, mainly from the focus group and the LRC on sizing and things like that. The splash pad is that input from staff, from the library, that they don't want wet kids running through the library. So in the upper right of the corner is I don't have a good pointer here. So in the upper right, it says restroom. That's a permanent restroom. So splash pad and restroom for daily programming. There's an open lawn turf area with the right side of the turf area kind of being elevated 3 to 4 feet. So like maybe just it elevates slightly to just higher than these tables. If you envision something for your kids to run up, roll down, all those things. The open lawn area will have movies on the lawn with blow up screens. You can do yoga on the plaza, the different furniture to sit in. The pavilion will have seating under it. You'll have your stage area, which we've taken input on, and have heard input on the stage area being elevated. So it's a good viewing experience from way back by the mound. And then we have like a lot of storage type considerations. You've got the zero entry, or not zero, I'm going in pool mode. Zero curbless street. So that street and the pavilion area is envisioned to have lighting over that whole area. And then in different strategic areas, there'll be bollards within the street that pop up. Like if you've been down to Larimer Square in downtown, they pop up. It looks classy when you close the street versus the orange barricade signs that we use. So that's the gist. Oh, and then you got a playground on the north side for kids. So you want this to be vibrant and active on a day-to-day basis was one of the big goals. And then a lot of trees for shade, because as things grow up, then you'll have shade. So parents have shade while kids are playing in the hot splash pad area and things like that. Then you get into proposed library viewing or programming. The library does like a summer reading carnival just in the plaza. They'll do some musicals and comedies and movement classes in the pavilion and stage area. They'll have their own outdoor movie screenings that they'll do in the turf area. Some inflatables. There's a drum festival they do that they'll set up. They envision food trucks along the library parking towards the south. As we move into the street fair setup, roughly, I think, 8 events, street fair, and not everything may align as I'm going through programming. So this is a thing I want you to pay attention to. Street fair, as we all know, the current Steinbach Pavilion is loved, and then next to it we have the tents that we love. We have the big serving area. So there's a desire to kind of like continue with that paradigm. And so then you have permanent serving areas that are going to be along the library parking. And then there's a desire to have a large protected, I wouldn't say it a beer garden. It's actually just a large protected viewing area tent. That's in the middle. That's what the rectangle in the middle represents. And then everything else kind of stays the same. Very upper right in the parking lot, additional restrooms, porta potties for the event. So I think the biggest thing on street fairs, they're trying to stick with the paradigm we have. May need to talk about a paradigm shift with street fair. These are big tents that get set up. Right now, they're staked into the asphalt parking lot and they're there for the season. And so you got to consider whether these things set up in their current sizes that they are desiring. We have to set up, we would have to create mounting systems for them if they're in these positions. And these are not like things where we like just throw it up on Thursday and take it down on Saturday afternoon. Like this stuff is there. So then we get into the farmers market working along their paradigm, tents along the street. And then they'll have like food court and performances likely in the pavilion area. Their tents could even shift into the pavilion area and be around the outside of the pavilion area. We are installing power sources in the budget considerations along Front Street, both on the library and plaza side. And then we'll be like looking at adding power sources on the north side of the plaza. Finally going into the ice rink. Then we go into ice rink season. So we have a very large ice rink. You've got hot chocolate, skate rental sales under the pavilion, maybe some warming huts. Notice there's some overlap with the rink, a little bit under the pavilion, but then over the turf. So that's kind of programming. Something I'm going to point out, and I think we've kind of hit decision point, and we've got other input, which we'll acknowledge, is the turf area, because of the amount of programming on it, is going to need to be artificial turf. And we've done a lot of research as staff. And just so you know, we've taken a lot of field trips to places that have turf or places that are putting on concert, other cities, some breweries where they have these similar types of activities. And it's just like every place that has had turf has ripped it out and gone to natural turf, has gone to artificial turf. Our environment is, it gets worn down in the winter, turns to mud. Half of it's going to be covered up by the ice rink. Also, you're going to have the concerts. It's going to get flattened during the concert. We don't have the ability to rest it and then go into programming for farmers market or the day-to-day through the week. So we've kind of arrived from a city operational aspect of what we can do and how much uptime we can provide. It needs to be artificial turf. Yeah, there's dogs and there's kids and people do things, and we'll work through that. That is the same for grass. There's also heat index that people are worried about and sustainability concerns. All these things have been solved by other people, and we will solve them ourselves. And so we don't want to talk about turf tonight. We feel like that's a closed topic because we cannot just upkeep natural turf through all the things that we want to do. This is just a reminder of what it kind of looks like from the concept plan. It's not necessarily exact visual of what we're doing right now. I mean, it's pretty darn close, but like materials and the roof and the stage are a little different. Your stage, this is what your stage looks like, right? Or at least your pavilion with the stage in it. From this picture, the stage might be elevated a little more from feedback we received. There might be tweaks on the materials on the pavilion, wood versus steel considerations and budgeting. But we're at 30% right now. So if this turns you off in its form factor, its shape, now's the time to let us know, like, I want the roof different. I want 2 pitches or whatever. But generally, the ultimate goal is to have the roof line down away. The lowest point is towards the railroad tracks to kind of like block out train noise as trains are going through. And we'll combine that with screening of landscaping. And then it really opens up more to Front Street. You'll still have some trees along the left side of it per se here. They'll provide shade for the concerts, and then you'll still have some viewing angles from Walnut Street and Front Street into the stage. The playground area, very simple concepts, just some play boulders and some play structures. A couple different options they provided us here, but all in all, they're all pretty basic, $150,000 to $200,000 play structure setups. And then there'll be like large, like call it like sandstone type rocks that kind of meander along the north side of the playground, stacked up so that, you know, kids can jump around on them and scrape themselves up, and parents can sit there and tell them to get up and brush themselves off and go back to the play structure. So all that good stuff. Tents. Yeah. What? Yeah. Totally. You guys get to cut. LRC's customizing the sign though. Sorry, you've already delegated that. Tents, we're trying to think in different terms of what tents could be. You're going to invest, $8 million. So perhaps a white vinyl tent is no longer the look. And we want to think beyond that, what that might be. There are different concepts out here. Here's one at Left Hand Brewing. These are called rocks boxes. They can be converted into beer serving food stations, can have keg rooms in them, taps built in, can be moved around. They can be made permanent or mobile. And so we're looking into these types of setups. These are about $75,000 to $100,000 a piece. Right now we have 2 of them programmed into the budget. And it may be that we need 3, 4, or 5 after we finish all these conversations. Or maybe we need 0 because someone comes up with a better idea. But Roxbox, they make these in Denver, and they have these up at the ski resorts. And so this isn't like anything new. We're just trying to take something that people are already doing well and turn it into something that's very systematic that we can roll in and out and flex events versus like having very permanent things that are very obtuse to set up and take down. I would say the analogy is like the patios. When we took over the patios, you had to build them out of Trex every year and then tear them down and try to save pieces and parts. And we kind of pivoted and created our own modular patio system. So now we roll in and out in a day. So these are similar types of things we're trying to think about, is just systemizing. There's a picture of one. This is called the Beer Can Pro with the taps and the keg room. So if you're thinking about your models you want, Beer Can Pro is what you probably want. Going into lighting and Main Street, I'm pivoting off of Steinbach now. We're doing Main Street. We worked with the consultant to talk about different ways you can light in different styles. And so we're talking about having a modular system. Think Larimer Square. Raise your hand if you've been to Larimer Square and you've seen the lights and the flags and all the things. Okay, I think we're all on the same page. So similar concept here, but also we've been asked by people to be also respectful and cognizant that Main Street is not Larimer Square. And so we want lighting to supplement Main Street, not take away from Main Street. We don't want Disneyland, right? So keeping that in mind, we've got options where we can put things at the intersections and then not necessarily run it a whole block, but have like quads that we put in the blocks. And so you can, with controllers, the intersections and each quad can be a different theme. You have different themes by blocks, different colors for seasonal impacts. We can do a lot with lighting. So there's some things that you see on the bottom here of styles that it could be. And you might have your own style that you'll tell us you really love. And then we'll try to talk about how to incorporate that. But from South Street to Pine Street, we would have lighting and at intersections and throughout the block. And this would be our own poles, our own setup, not reliant on Excel. This would be city-owned things. So we manage it all. Again, some other patterns. You can have just a simple zigzag. You could have diamonds with rings in the middle. You can have globes. Again, there's the flags. You could have just globes. You could not have things across the street. It could just be from the side of the street. So you're all looking at this and you're picking your favorite, I can tell. There's just ChatGPT's best version of flags and lights over Main Street. Obviously, we got to work with this a little bit, but for a week of trying to show you a concept, there you go. So this is up in Fort Collins. This is Linden Street. It looks like a lot, but when you go up there and you walk it, it's very beautiful. It's very well done. And so we're probably looking at something like this, and then maybe we back off on the fancy rings or things, or maybe you add more. This is all up to all of you. Just trying to give you ideas. So we've pivoted to the lighting. That's where we went from 3 million to 1 million. We still need to contemplate plantings, but by the Historical Museum over the last few years, they've done a really great job of landscaping. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and it just pops when you go down there. So we think trying to bring that down through downtown and have a increased enhanced planting program really can also set you apart. You know, anyone can hire an architect, throw up lights and pavers, and you know what? You start going to a lot of these areas, and they all look vanilla and the same. And I think the areas that are doing things that feel different and do it well, it has a lot of plantings and a lot of nature to soften all the hardscape. The big thing that everyone's interested in is where are we at on budget? Well, these are numbers just as of today. We're still doing a lot of refining. A lot of this stuff is kind of fixed. So like you got a demo, you got a site prep, you got to do some earthwork. We got to bring in water and sewer if we have permanent bathrooms. There's irrigation for plantings. We got to rip up asphalt. We got to put back down concrete and pavers. You'll have your pavilion and your stage. That's one of the biggest costs, around $1.4 million right now. Splash pad with the permanent restroom is around 200,000. Playground, like I said, is around 200,000. It's around 300,000 just in like bollards and planters that you spread out and seating. So all kind of your furniture in your house per se. There's a very large electrical allowance. So the electrical allowance is going to be the lighting on the site for like performances, and then that AV lighting electrical setup in the stage. There's still a lot to learn and value engineer and understand in this, so that 800 8 or 900 is going to start to break apart in chunks that we can talk more specifically of, like, do we have the amazing lighting strobe systems, or are we more moderate or low end? So we'll still have those conversations, but Steinbach itself gets to be around $5 million for what we're trying to visualize with you right now. Then general conditions is what you pay a contractor to, like, their overhead on the project. They've got about 10% contingency, which is about $500,000 of like, oh, we didn't know that was going to pop up. All right, we got this extra cash sitting here to like take care of the unknowns. So your construction total for Steinbach is around 6 million. There may be water and sewer tap fees that could add up to hundreds of thousands in there. That could also be a policy decision by the city council. The utility staff can't say it's free, but other people in this room can. And then we'll also try to also work with our team to minimize whatever those tap fee costs may be. On Main Street right now, the lighting's about 900,000 for what I just kind of showed you, the concept of things at the intersection, things in the middle, and then we can independently control it. We kind of, as a city, lost focus of why we started the project. We didn't kind of, we did. That we started because we still have trees and irrigation and plantings that aren't great on Main Street and Front Street and some other areas of downtown. So we have to circle back around and also acknowledge what we still got to fix up, because you don't want gold plated stuff next to blighted stuff, right? That doesn't work well. And I think that missed the point of some of the revitalization. So there's some costs in there. South Street's a part of your budget. So South Street, just current topic. It was on South Street, and then we had a lot of business and public input that it shouldn't be on South Street. Then we pivoted and provide a bunch of alternatives to everyone publicly at Rocky Mountain Tap and Garden with all the people. And people came in, they said, I hate that, I love that, all that. And ended up shifting back to South Street with all the public input we got. That won't make everyone happy, but it makes the majority of people in life happy. So this is just where South Street is right now. We're going to have another shindig at Rocky Mountain Tap and Garden next week on the 4th. You should all come and hang out, where we'll get input on this kind of final design that's been informed by both Tebow and their tenants and the residents of the whole area, which have only just been one that showed up and provided input. even though we've blasted the apartments and the homes and all that stuff. So this is just where South Street's at. So it's about to sprint with front and center. If I roll that all up, you have 10 million that we were going to do for bonding capacity. $1 million was going to South Street. South Street's still within design program of the 10 million total budget. So South Street $1 million is holding. Design is 1.2 million. That has been approved by the city council, and RVI is our landscape architect under contract. ECI is our contractor under contract for pre-construction services. So the people that are designing this and building this, they're on board. They're ready to rock. Construction, we have about 7.8 million left. There's 100,000 or so in there for like fees for the financing, but for round numbers tonight, we're at 7.8. So the plaza I said is around 6. Main Street's $1 million. There's a little extra work to do. We have 600,000 unprogrammed. So from a budget perspective, we don't have high stress risk. This is significantly different than where we were a couple of weeks ago when we were talking with people when we pivoted off of Main Street from the hardscape that was like 3 million, just focused on lighting and plantings. We were able to bring that budget way down and I think get higher impact, to be honest. So what isn't a priority and you want to reduce it more today when you inform us? What is you want more of that thing? So you want to invest more in it? Again, City Manager Langley said about what's the city want to invest more. Probably still might have $1 million to $2 million flex in here. So we want to kind of have that conversation for the final budget. Everyone's really antsy about when are we going to do all this stuff. So right now we're sitting in February. We're kind of what we call, we're in 30% design review. Like there's a lot of components that are just still moving forward. Like nothing's at a standstill, but we do got to make big component choices soon. So we have this meeting and then we'll go back to doing hops with LRC, but we have an LRC cutoff in April of like major changes, like major cost changes. And that would be like, I want a splash pad in or out, or I want more restrooms or more lighting. Like those are major things. Then probably we get to start like May or June and we'll have an LRC minor cutoff. Like we'll have refined and said like, oh, I love this paver versus that paver, and some of the refinement or material selection on the pavilion, or maybe interesting things in the playground. So those are kind of cutoff periods. We will be sprinting from like a 30 to 90% plan set. We're not, different components will get designed to different levels because we have a contractor on board. They are doing pre-construction programming with us. Some things we may only take to 60%, and they say like, good enough, we can build from that. Other more complex things we may take to 90%, and because they need that level of design to do that complexity. That's going to transition into what we call construction manager risk contract. It might be other terms as a guaranteed maximum price, but essentially we have selected a contractor, ECI, which you have hired through a competitive process where they have a certain amount of overhead that they apply to the project, a certain amount of qualification and skill set that they've proven to bring through previous performance on other projects in other communities. And so we'll work with ECI to buy out in packages. So it might be possible that we go out, buy out Main Street lighting first, and we come to LRC and we're going to say we're going to buy out. The LRC says that's amazing. Go to council. Council approves the Main Street lighting buyout package. And then maybe a month or two later, we come with the Steinbach package and LRC says, yeah, we like that, or tweak it just a hair more. Or it's too expensive. We value some things. Then we come to council. We have the Steinbach buyout package, and then Steinbach gets going. So we just think this is roughly the schedule. We'll be designing and buying out through the year. We need to stop playing around with you guys really by June. And hopefully we can start late summer getting going on Main Street lighting, finish that by the end of the year for the, that could be the, yes, that exactly. What's the other thing in Boulder? My head's tired today. The big thing in Boulder, Sundays. We can be Sundance ready on Main Street with some lights too, and a parade of lights. And we will start on Steinbach as soon as we finish our concert series and farmers market series. So as soon as we can get in there, we would start that. So that's schedule, and I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna go to the front and I'll turn it over to all of you. Thank you for your patience.
So, Kurt, will you be able to share this saw some of the LRC members like this isn't in our package. Will you be able to share this presentation with the group?
Yeah, well, you guys are talking. I'll kick it out.
Okay.
I got to do some conversion. This is only like hours old, so I apologize. But you're getting the freshest information.
Yeah, why don't we start with?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to suggest that we pull up the questions that you had asked a little bit earlier.
What do you want more of? What do you want less of? And what do you want to put money into? But I think to frame, good point. Let's start with programming. I think day to days, pretty straightforward. The conversation is, do you want a splash pad in or out? Your budget right now seems to be trending that a splash pad can be in. Does anyone have major issues with that?
So I think because it is in my thought, because we haven't had anything stay on budget, very unlikely that in the course of the next couple of years of them doing this and bidding and the way that construction things and the craziness of the cost of products, I think that we'll end up needing a little bit more money to get some of the tweaks in. And every bit of feedback I have heard is that if there's one area of concern with ongoing costs, ongoing maintenance, impact of wet people and pets in and around town, I'd say this is for 200,000, and that's the lowest. I think, didn't you tell us before, Kurt, it was 2 to 3 for the splash pad?
Yeah, I mean, you start we're at Romney's, started with big guesses, started with funny guesses. We're finding now.
Okay.
So these numbers today that are only hours old are better than the numbers you're
Okay.
getting, like, a couple months.
So, I mean, I think I'd rather take that couple 100,000 and let it go toward the lighting on Main Street than a splash pad that is going to need a lot of money and maintenance, and I'm not sure exactly what that's going to cost.
Let me pull back on the framing a bit. I think I would prefer us to focus on anything that first of all, if there are questions the council has, and second of all, if there are substantial concerns that council has on elements. What I want to avoid, I do not want to get into picking up a lot of detail because these are they're general plans. There's certainly something we want to talk about. Councilmember Kerner just raised one of them. I don't want to get in the weeds of budget. But I think we owe it to you to try to tell us, or for us to tell you, if there are some big issues in these plans that we have suggestions about. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
I have a comment in regard to the framing you just proposed.
Mhm.
But were you done? I don't want to interrupt.
Yes.
So I think I wrote down that the 3 things the city manager proposed we talk about, and the first one was budget and schedule. And I'm very pleased to see the new budget slide that doesn't show a huge funding gap compared to what's in our packet, which I'm, couldn't be happier about that. I think on the sort of finer grain questions about the budget, I would defer all of those to LRC. This is an LRC project. And I don't know, to the mayor's point, that we want to be deep in the details. I personally don't want to be deep in the details of sort of the design decisions that you've been shepherding along this whole time. So I would personally kick those over to you. On schedule, I mean, I think the timeline you presented makes sense to me. Looks like we're starting as soon as we possibly can and then trying to move quickly. So to zoom out even farther, I'm very pleased with the progress so far and hope we continue on this track because it's looking really good.
Kurt, would you put up that slide that you had those questions on? I think that's useful. Yeah.
I would say I would feel more confident to get, because we know numbers change. And I would feel more confident. I mean, looking at these numbers, yes, it appears that we're within budget, but we still haven't talked about mitigation for businesses. We know numbers can change. I would feel more confident if we could walk away knowing, if needed, if council's willing to contribute any capital funds towards this project, just because I hate to walk away from this because we're still at 30%. And then we get to a point 4 months from now and we've gone further down this design and then realize like, oh, the numbers have creeped up a little bit. And now we're back to how are we going to cut to get within budget? I would rather have a little bit of a buffer and allowance and to know that we have that, not so that we can design up to that, but so that as we move forward, we can try to stay within budget. We're not having to come back and say like, well, we thought we could do it, but now we need to do X.
Yes.
Follow up with that. I think it's important that we under promise and over deliver on this project. And I did know, and I assume we're still at 30% design, Kurt? Is that? Right. Yeah, I found it interesting that it's still with a 10% contingency, which I think at this point of design is really low. And I would really strongly recommend that we revisit that, because I think at this point in design, probably 15 to 20% is more realistic. In every project we've done, I mean, in recent time, we've had, cost issues and, and we had low contingencies and, we ended up having to do major changes in the middle of the projects or eliminate projects. So I think we should be realistic on that.
Yeah, I think I agree with everyone. I think what I said earlier on, I was going through, is we still have 1 to 2 million of flex, so that's 10 to 20%, and I think we're saying that. Just to answer your question, were we trending under right now? Yeah. So yeah, we have 2 million out there potential to be made up if we state it how everyone just stated it.
Are the rocks boxes currently in the budget?
2 are, and so there's, if you need multiple for beer, then you need another 200,000-300,000.
When I take Commissioner Adler's question, then Councilor Hefner, and then let's say, do we have other council member Fahey? Go ahead.
I've got a quick question for Kurt. What can you explain what was removed from the Main Street plan since I guess you presented to us last?
Yeah. Yes.
And explain more about that and what, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, it's easier to bear with me. So basically we're gonna, at the corners of Main Street, put in directional ramps and pull out concrete and put in pavers. So essentially what you see here, it was that. We're gonna do that at all 4 corners and extend it for some small length along each block, but it wouldn't cover the whole block. And then in addition, probably extend it about as far as you see in this picture. And then in addition, that might come with some street furniture. So where you see the planter, maybe there'll be a bench where the fire hydrant was. And then it would be some form of lighting like you see in this intersection, just over each intersection, but not along the block of Main Street. So the conversations we had with everyone, both council interactions and LRC interactions, is it didn't feel like, I don't think anyone has felt along the way like the sidewalk corner treatment was transformational or if it'd be like heavily used. The lighting was always important to everyone and felt like that had bigger impact. And so we basically just pulled the pavers out and left the lighting in and expanded lighting. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I was just gonna add to my earlier comment that, and to answer the city manager's question, if there's an additional contingency amount to the tune of 10%, which would be $700,000-ish. I mean, I think to me, that would make sense for us to consider sort of holding if we end up needing it, recognizing that we may or may not end up needing it. What I wouldn't want to do, at least at this stage, is commit to putting in a lot of additional money to re-expand the scope of the project. I think we have probably the right scope. If there's additional contingency that council needs to fund to the tune of 5 or 10%, that makes a lot of sense to me. We want to get this project done correctly. And I think we have the right focus on Front Street right now. Let's do a great job on Front Street, save most of the Main Street stuff for another day. And hopefully we'll get it done within the amount currently budgeted, but if there's a little extra, there's a little extra.
Go ahead, Councilmember Fahey.
I wanted to say first, I think the plan is wonderful. I really like the lighting on Main Street. I like the whole plan for the pavilion area. I'm wondering, is to your question on Sunflower, could we get some space heaters and have an event at the pavilion in January?
Oh, Sundance.
Oh, Sundance, sorry, Sundance, yes. Wrong one.
Yeah.
And then my question for you is on South Street. Is that going to eliminate any of the parking on South Street or the traffic when there's nothing actually going on at the pavilion?
Right now, we're not impacting any parking on South Street.
Okay. All right, then good. Then I'm with Dietrich and I would be willing to give a little more if necessary.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I think Dietrich, I think you did a good job of framing the the council position I have is, yeah, don't like, oh yeah, spend an extra 2 million, but this project seems like it's budgeted well, and we understand you might go over. And if you go over, finish the project and council will help fill that gap. But it's different than saying necessarily even, oh, add 4 more canisters. That's an intentional increase of the budget rather than something just being more expensive. So I'm super in support of that. My big, and then from a scheduling, I think it's great. And I'm happy with some of the changes. I think my big sort of concerns that I don't need answered tonight, but I want you guys to continue to work on is the stage and the canopy and the sound. I am not an acoustician, is what you call someone who works on acoustics, but I'm not, clearly. But I'm concerned. I don't think I've ever seen like an amphitheater, if you will, that has a slanted. So I just have a little concern over like, have we studied not just the look and feel, but how the music will work? And I'm a little concerned that we're repeating the same problem that the current pole barn has, which is it's actually hard to see the stage with all those poles once you're in the wrong angle. And so that's just general concerns with the actual new pavilion, is that it will kind of repeat some of the issues we already have with sound and sight. Thank you for mentioning the business impact, city manager, that we don't have that budgeted. So council, if we want to think about like typically with a project like this that might disturb, a few, not a ton, honestly, but a few businesses pretty extremely, that there's some budget for, and Vanessa's been working on that, of what that might be for them. And that's not included in their budget. I don't need the answer, but I'd like to know more information about the restroom. Like it's 2 toilets or it's 14 toilets, really different, right? Like what is that building and what is it actually providing? It's 2 total. Yeah. So, and I know we'll have porta potties for big events, but like thinking about as you're finishing the design, is a 2 bathroom sufficient, or should it be 4 or something like that? So I think about that. I am not excited about a tent, and I didn't think that was a big deal, but Kurt pointed out to me another day that, oh no, it's a big part of the design because you actually have to design where the anchors go and all that. So wanting or not wanting a tent, I'm like, well, we'll figure that out at the end. Well, actually, no, you might want to figure that out on the front side. So I'm not in support of a big tent in the middle all summer long. I think it kind of ruins the whole feel of it. And that if you were going to spend more money generally, I'd spend it on plants everywhere. Like, so yeah, Main Street, but also plantings and planter boxes and mobile planter boxes and things like that, that the more plants, not just trees are great, but movable and seasonal plants are doing such a good job with that. So those are like my main issues. And I don't disagree that if push comes to shove and you need to cut the splash pad, that's not the purpose of the space, in my opinion. I think it's an auxiliary thing that if we need to cut something, I would think about cutting that.
Can I jump in here? Yeah. Sure. So the LRC was presented this 2 weeks ago. And we haven't had time to talk about some of these specific splash pad, big ass tent in the middle of the thing, a lot of stuff. We have artificial turf versus natural. And so there's two things that I'm concerned about from an LRC perspective. And this goes to my fellow commissioners and to Vanessa. The first is, I think our expectation is still, or council's expectation may still be, that the LRC will be reaching a consensus about specific design elements, i.e. the splash pad, i.e. the tent. And these other things that have popped up since that presentation. But the question is, when are we going to do that? We don't have a timeline mapped out to reach a consensus among the LRC about these specific things. We have already said we're probably not going to get into the weeds on most of that tonight. Chant has come up, splash pad has come up, but we need to map out a process and a timeline where the LRC can fulfill what we believe is an obligation to City Council about our specific recommendations here. The second thing that I have concerns about is part of the reason the tent is complicated is my understanding is that for DBA, it's non-negotiable that this beer tent, the big beer tent is a requirement. And so one of the things that I'm still concerned about from an LRC perspective, and, again, other commissioners can weigh in on this, is I don't feel like we've heard enough from some of the key stakeholders like DBA, like Street Fair, maybe the library, maybe businesses, other businesses and residents. Now, we're told that outreach and that communication is happening, but when we were told about the big tent, I didn't know it was a non-negotiable with DBA. So we need to, as an LRC, I think, better understand where are these stakeholders coming from? What are the big issues that are unresolved in their minds? Because that's going to factor into, I think, what we can recommend to council. So those are two pretty big lifts. They're not going to happen in a month. So, Kurt has raised concerns for, over a year now about, deliberation on this stuff. But those are two big issues that I don't see a path. I know there's a path, but I don't understand what it is. I don't know that the other commissioners do. The chair doesn't. And so I think we need to figure out not tonight, but I'm letting you know that this obligation that we feel we have to you isn't crystal clear about how that will unfold. And so this is something I think we need to talk about in our next meeting, our upcoming meetings.
May I add one thing? I just want to remind everyone, we did go through a big public process and we did adopt a plan, and these plans did or did not show certain elements like big tents in the middle of things. And so we're going to go down whatever path anyone wants, but we've been operating under the adopted plan by the city council. And if we open a lot of different doors for every group that wants to reopen a door, consider we may not build this year. I just want to add that.
And
Manager,
add-
I think.
The event stakeholders, including internal stakeholders, have been active with the focus group as well as outside and separate meetings. So the project team has met separately and independently with the street fair outside of the focus group 4 times, and the farmers market I think 3 times. And so the the DBA has told staff that they are very interested in this tent. And we have relayed to them that we don't think being able to put a tent in the middle of these improvements is a viable option. So why don't we work with them to figure out what different layouts could be to make sure that the event space can work for street fair and all of the other stakeholders that are going to be using the stage.
Am I incorrect in my assumption that we're being looked to provide recommendations about some of these specifics, trees on Main Street? I think it's way over treed, but this isn't the time and place to do that. My understanding is that's what the council is expecting, but we're not really prepared to do that because we haven't heard all of this information that you're describing has been gathered, like the big tent. So I'm just saying we need to have the LRC kind of come together about a timeline and a process to be able to deliver on this obligation. And maybe I'm speaking, only for myself, but I'm not sure we feel like we're there yet.
Commissioner Lipton.
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying. I mean, as a member of the commission. And we just haven't had the kind of information presented to us specifically about what the options are and why we've gone down certain paths and why we're not going down other paths. And I don't think this would take a long time. We can get this done at our next meeting in 2 weeks. We just got to specifically invite DBA and the farmers market people and anybody else saying, hey, this is your last chance. Tell us what you're thinking. And then we can decide, and we may, suggest just changing the plan, or we, say, sorry, no tent, or whatever we decide to do. We need a little bit more process. And it doesn't have to take months. It can take a matter of weeks. We can meet more frequently, provided we provide sufficient notice. And I think we're all committed to doing it. What we're not committed to do is giving you guys half-assed recommendations without having the information that we feel compelled to get before we can make good recommendations.
And just to represent the LRC at the last meeting, there was a request to have 1 or 2 more hops and have these types of meetings before we came to the council. Unfortunately, the schedules weren't working for everyone, so we had to have tonight happen. So we are a little out of order than what was requested. So
There are a whole variety of things going on here because we've got a sort of process question, we've got a dollars question. It sounds like the commission hasn't had a chance to digest what was presented tonight. It strikes me that that's the first piece of this, because we are looking to you to rough out, and more than rough out, the plans that you have for the expenditure of the funds that you're putting forward to complete the project. So I think seems to me that before we do anything else, that's necessary, and I'm all for not providing half-assed recommendations. I think it's really important. I think the issue of how we go from here, I have a question as to whether we need to approve or we're just providing input at this point as a council.
yeah, my understanding is you've delegated design decisions to the LRC, like they've just stated. But we are at a critical point where we need some key input. So you're just providing input.
Okay. And it sounds like those inputs, from what I have gathered, are both whether we're willing to, as a council, put money behind some money behind the project, and if so, how much? And we've had one suggestion, which I think is a good suggestion, but we haven't talked about that fully. And then there's the question that you raised at the beginning, or I heard very loud and clear, which is now's the time for council to be saying, if there's something in the plans that are there right now, speak. And I think that's something we can do tonight from a council perspective. And then you go back and look at it and take that into account in your evaluation. I think it's, and I'm just speaking for myself, but I think it's a good idea to invite those stakeholders to the meeting just to get the same kind of information to you. Is it absolutely necessary? I don't know, but I think it's a prudent move, and they're going to have really good things and appropriate things to say. Probably somebody's going to be unhappy with the final result. That's just the way it goes. But I think from a council standpoint, we have delegated to you, in completing the plan, the urban renewal plan, that you handle this and you come forward and make some decisions about how it goes. But tonight, I think we should, council needs to provide the number, or if there is one, and to describe for you any suggestions we have. I want to say one other thing about and then I'm going to ask my fellow council members whether they agree with me, because they may not. But I think the other piece, the support piece, the support for businesses that isn't a part of the dollars. One of the things that we're planning to do, get the three members of the EDC here, Councilmember Kern and Councilmember Fahey and me, that's one of the things that we're going to try to make some recommendations to council about that piece. And I don't know that being, I think it's probably a council responsibility to be doing that. I'm not sure it's necessarily I don't think it's a LRC responsibility, but I want to hear from our council members on that. But it just seems to me it's, that you ought to be looking at these plans. We ought to be providing whatever input we're going to provide tonight. And then, we deal with the other issues relating to support for the businesses separately. But I'm interested in whether council is comfortable with that approach. So. Go ahead.
I think, again, what Diedrich said, I think being the backstop for contingencies, and what Chris said, taking on the concept of the business impact are what I'm prepared to commit to. I know those aren't specific numbers, but those general concepts, and then otherwise, that yes, we're relying on you guys to keep going through the process and get to a final recommendation. I know I'll be there. I hate being over here. I know. I'm wearing this hat tonight. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, that's how I see it, is like, you guys are the decision makers, and how much information you need from people that have already provided information to staff, and you want to hear it again, that's fine. We're finished the project, give us a recommendation, and you're doing great so far. We're super happy with what we see currently.
You've already provided suggestions. I mean, tonight you mentioned it. Councilman Kern provided a couple, but I'm not certain that she's provided all of them, and I think there's others. But I want to make sure that we lock down from council standpoint those big changes. I don't want to talk about little smaller issues, but I think the big ones, the design elements, I think that's something that we're very, if we have any questions, any suggestions, we need to make them tonight.
Well, and what I was trying to lead by example is, I'm not telling you need to change the bathroom. I'm just telling you, look into the bathroom, make sure you guys are happy with the bathroom you have. Make sure you're happy with the stage you have. I'm not telling you. Now, I'll be sitting over there and having that conversation, but I was just trying to lead by example. Those are the big topics that we want you to cover, but I don't have the answers to those topics.
Any other questions or concerns about that framing of what we're doing tonight from here? So we're gonna, we could talk about any elements that you have that you are providing input on, not direction necessarily, not, I'm gonna say not direction.
Mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a moment. Let me finish.
Sorry.
And then we can talk about the budget piece, which we've already gotten started on. Yeah. No, that's my suggestion for moving this forward to a conclusion. Okay. Any concerns about that? All right. Do we have any other issues that you all have with the plans or the other parts of the presentation that Kurt had mentioned tonight? Sure.
Well, I've heard a couple comments to the effect that let's focus on front. Main will sort of massage and maybe address somewhat later. I'm just curious if that's a consensus on council because it's not among the LRC. It's not far off, but I think there are some people that are all in on front. There are others that are like, we won't get another swing at this ball if we put off Main Street.
So you'd like input on that?
Correct.
Whether the pivot that Director Coer was mentioning is the kind of thing that we have some point of view on. Okay. Yes.
Well, let us explain first why we feel the way we do. And, many of us feel Main Street is the front door to Louisville. And this is what you see day in, day out, 12 months a year. You have businesses trying to decide whether they want to make investments or reinvestments in their property. People want to decide whether they want to come down on 12 months a year to go to a restaurant, to, do something in downtown. And we have to balance that need with the venue part of this, where you have 8 or 12 or how many events you have each year on Front Street. Now that's important because it does generate money. But in terms of image, when you look at your pictures of Louisville and up and down Main Street, that's really important too. So we weren't trying to exclude Main Street. We were trying to spread, proportionally spread the funds so that we do some things with Main Street, although we know the venue Front Street part of this is also really important. We want to do that right, but not at the expense of ignoring Main Street.
Clarifying question. Is it fair to say that maybe this discussion is premature? Maybe you all need to have a discussion amongst yourselves about that, or you want us to provide this?
Yeah, this is kind of a strategic question that you have to give us feedback on.
All right. I just want to make sure that that's the case. So we can start with that one about whether we're comfortable with the approach or whether we aren't.
I agree with all of the things that were just said about Main Street. The hang up for me is the Front Street portion of the project plus lights on Main Street consumes all of the available budget, if not more than all of the available budget. And to do the rest on Main Street requires at least an additional $2 million, probably 2 million plus 3 million. And we've all been through the last couple of budget cycles. I don't see any viable source from which we're going to pull $3 million at a time where we're already squeezing whatever we can squeeze to fund other things that we've taken on. So, but for want of $3 million, do I say no? I think it's great. I would love to see us do more on Main Street. To me, it's important to try and do one thing really well than two things sort of not so well. And that's where I come down.
Strategic question around Main Street. If you are talking about Main, it would help us understand what type of improvement would make you most excited. We're trying to just read a lot of minds on what you like, but maybe you guys will align if you just say 1 or 2 elements.
I think, from my perspective, I'm frustrated because I think the table keeps changing a little bit. And I'm not sure that that's nobody's fault. It's just I'm trying to get a handle about what you need us to provide input on. Because what I heard was we need input about whether we want more more of what originally has been proposed that costs the extra $2.7 million on Main Street in addition to what we have on Front Street. Is that a question you need an answer to?
That was in our plan a couple weeks ago, right?
Main Street with hardscape at the corners and lighting just at the intersections was in the 30% design a couple weeks ago.
That just changed.
And we made that pivot based off what we thought we heard was very strong LRC feedback and then other feedback just individually from council members here and there, but not in this type of meeting.
And it sounds like there is not consensus among members of the LRC about that pivot. You're looking for input from us. Is that fair to say?
I think we had general consensus for the drawings we saw 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
We felt pretty good.
Right.
The lighting, down payment towards plantings and a little bit of streetscape, but also de-emphasize the streetscape because we know how expensive that was going to be.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I would agree with that, to de-emphasize the streetscaping. If you can create the kind of image that is at the corner where the museum is, in a few corners downtown, I think that will go a long way to enhancing Main Street. I've heard dozens of comments on those plantings, and if you can, if the city can create that kind of enthusiasm on other corners, I think that goes a long way.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Fahey.
Can I also add that it would be helpful for a lot of people if there were benches, more seating along Main Street, so that, if you're elderly or some, have new joints, you can sit, or with kids that, want to sit down and play. So.
What it looks like to me, cutting through it, is that you're looking for council support for spending, roughly $2.7 million to get to doing what was in your previous. No?
No.
I'm okay. What do you? Then why don't you tell us?
I'll
what you
take
want?
another stab at it, but it is sort of some sense from council about how important is Front compared to Main. And obviously there are going to be trade-offs. So do we cut a little bit out of Main or cut a little bit out of Front Street and try to put more into Main? I mean, it's just getting a sense, because we haven't reached consensus ourselves, but there is a train moving down the station that is basically all in on Front and then some left over for Main. And I'm not sure we're there yet, but if you are, that's significant.
I know, I understand that. Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Hamlet.
First, I'm losing steam. It's 9:00. I thought we were going to be done in 3 hours. I've got a babysitter at home that I told her I'd be home at 9:00. So I feel like we're circling the drain here, and we're not really getting to where we need to be. So I'm going to attempt to just voice my opinion on a few things. And I'm hoping we can wrap up soon in a way that gives you all what you need, knowing that we still have a conduit through staff to get you more information. But I'm about at the end of my night right now. As far as well, first of all, main and front, Councilmember Hefner, I think nicely summarized my thoughts on it. If we're going to do Front Street, let's do it right. And that might mean putting up the lights and plantings on Main Street and not doing the pavers at this point in time, because it's just really hard to see where it's going to come out of the budget to be able to do something like that. As far as the current budget and schedule goes, I think it looks great, and I'm willing to add in, some more contingency from capital funds as needed. Councilmember Hefner offered up, a general range. I think my ask would be that before we dip into that contingency fund, we look at things like splash pad and other ways we can reduce costs before we go into that. And the last two things I'll say is, like Councilmember Dickinson, as far as like big strategic planning items that, I feel strongly about. One is I'm not wed to the splash pad, so if we have to cut that, totally okay with it. And two, not super excited about the huge tent and having to build infrastructure around that. So with that, I'm hoping my council members can commit to the communication style we all discussed a few weeks ago and effectively voice our summaries as well so we can get out of here.
Well put. Yes, go ahead. Councilmember Cooperman and then Councilmember Fahey.
I agree with everything that Barbara just said. We'll just add a couple little things. I think it would be great to think a little bit more about bicycle parking. I'm a little bit concerned about the intersection between tents along the library for street fair and the farmers market, but I assume someone can figure out how to deal with that. I think actually Judy had a suggestion, which is to provide adequate electricity for food trucks. I thought that was a good one. And then one last idea is like, if there were appropriate method for feedback from council, I would be willing to consider like, you could come to us with, say, oh, we want this amount of money for this add-on, and then we could consider that add-on. Yeah.
I would just like to ditto whatever Barbara just said.
Councilmember Kern.
So I think that I agree. I think the Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton's tweak to Councilmember Hefner's comments were good, especially related to the budget. We'd love to see some cuts before we would agree to, or I would agree to dip into some contingency funds. Really expensive hardscaping on Main Street. Not sure that it's worth the investment, but I think you guys are on the right track in looking at your job is blight. And I'm hard pressed to feel that the day-to-day enhancements for like the library activities are part of that project, but I could see where enhancing the aspects of Main Street is. So in keeping with your actual goal and purpose, in as an urban renewal authority and how to spend that money. I think so. I guess I'm in favor of actually maybe tweaking the Front Street plans to allow for like the lighting and the enhanced plantings and things like that. Since you guys are looking for some of that feedback on Main Street, I think I was disappointed at first when I thought there would be nothing done to Main Street just so it could all be spent on front. I was with most of you. I think that I went, what? Wait, Main Street gets nothing? That's a lot of money to not make Main Street, which is the main avenue of Louisville, gorgeous. So I think you're on the right track. That's my opinion. And so you've got a good direction to go. And please do consider Deb's benches. It's an ADA thing. Same thing around that mound that's sloped. If it's tiered, I mean, it's detail stuff, but it's an ADA issue versus just not everybody is under the age of 5. So thank you.
And my only comment is that I actually like the comments of all 6 of my fellow council members. So I'm comfortable With there is a little, maybe a slight bit of conflict in not doing anything more on Main or whatever. I think it's good, especially given the discussion that you all provided, to have some flexibility in providing more on Main and seeing what you could do to maybe economize a little bit more, or value engineer, or just simply make good choices that are a little bit less elaborate. So with that, I mean, the question is whether staff, I suppose, has enough direction in what we've just discussed to be able to advise the LRC and
I think y'all have been very clear. You delegated the rest of the designing to LRC, which also indirectly delegates the programming decisions to LRC. I think that's what I'm clear on. We all clear?
And I think as far as the money goes, I mean, how are we on roughly the $765,000, provided that it's actually?
I think we have enough direction on that. Sounds like there's a willingness to consider, so we can forward to the existing proposed elements if there's anything that's new proposed. So let me restate that. Willing to consider additional funding to support the current project, would like to see us cut if we can prior to dipping into that money. And if there's a request for additional elements, that should come back to council for consideration.
Fair enough.
And before we, because I believe we need to take public comment.
Yeah. Do we have any public comment?
No.
This time.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Jillian.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So be very quick, 'cause I know you guys are ready to get out of there. Just a couple of comments from today. We did send a letter in from the chamber earlier, and it just seems like a lot of the things in that letter are going to be really relevant to the conversation that the LRC is going to have. So we look forward to maybe engaging a little bit more on that, giving you some specific information that we've received from Kelly from Farmers Market and so on, but all positive stuff. It's fantastic to hear that there's potential support from the city for a contingency. So thank you for kind of considering that. And also thanks to Caleb and to EVC committee for keeping business impacts part of the conversation. It's really helpful for me to share with the business community that they're being thought about throughout this process. So thank you for doing that, and looking forward to seeing where we go next for this project. Thanks for everyone's hard work. It's really coming together and looks fantastic.
Thank you, Jillian. There was initially a discussion point to make there some interest in a discussion on sub 3. I think that's been sort of withdrawn. Is there anybody who would like to talk about discussion and direction on new urban renewal areas that, pardon me?
I will say, I believe we got the feedback we needed on how we want to move forward. So as plans come up, we will follow that process and then be in front of.
I just didn't know whether somebody had some plan or suggestion that they wanted to make. Now it's on the agenda. I just wanted to cover it. I think that we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
Favor.
Aye.
Aye.